Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into something a little more uncomfortable the average Roman evening. That's right, no emperors, no gladiators, no steamy orgies in marble bathhouses. Just you, a tunic, and the distinct scent of fish sauce lingering in the air. Welcome to the real Rome, the bustling, sweaty, slightly chaotic city, where evenings weren't filled with opera or wine-soaked poetry, but laundry, questionable stew, and someone yelling in Latin about stolen lentils. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Somehow, it's always 2:17 a.m., and you're clinging to consciousness like a Roman clings to his sandals. Now dim the lights, turn on a fan for that sweet ancient white noise, and snuggle up under a blanket that hopefully doesn't smell like amphora storage. Let me ask you some important questions. Have you ever wondered what a Roman really did after sunset? Did they unwind with a Netflix scroll equivalent? Or was it more wash your toga before the lice hatch? Was there night pizza? Was there small talk? Was there plumbing? Did Romans wear pajamas? Did they gossip about Caesar's hairline over cheap wine? Were their pillows stuffed with down or disappointment? And most importantly, what did they do when they stubbed their toe in the dark on a marble statue of Jupiter? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 114 CE. It's evening in the bustling city of Rome. You're not a senator, you're not an emperor, you're just an ordinary Roman citizen. The sun is dipping behind the tiled roofs. The streets are alive with the sounds of donkeys, drunk poets, and street vendors arguing about cabbage. And you've got a long evening ahead of you. As the sun sinks behind the temples and tiled roofs of Rome, the Subura, the working-class neighborhood, doesn't go quiet. It changes gears. Street sellers pack up their carts. Bakers shout final deals on leftover bread. And you? You're making your way home, dodging puddles of something, and hoping your neighbor isn't in another expressive phase of learning the lyre. Your tunic is sticking to your back. Your sandals are full of gravel, and your legs are debating whether to collapse or file a formal complaint. It's been a long day. You've been sweating in the sun since dawn, hauling bricks, pounding iron, or if you were really lucky, trying to keep up with an amphora inventory that defies the laws of basic math. Rome may be the center of the empire, but the Subura? It's the armpit. Not in a bad way, just in a damp, overworked, slightly funky way. It's where real Romans live, where alley cats scream, babies cry, someone's always cooking cabbage, and laundry lines double as neighborhood security systems. You pass a man arguing with a chicken, and honestly, the chicken is winning. Just another Tuesday. The streets are alive with after-work energy. You pass a thermopolium, a Roman fast food stall where someone is ordering a ladle of lentil stew and a half sausage that looks like it's lived 3 lives already. A woman hollers at her child in Latin, her voice echoing off cracked plaster walls. A boy tries to juggle walnuts to impress a girl. It's going poorly, but it's charming. You pause by a fountain, splashing water on your face. It's cool, bracing, and probably cleaner than most of your belongings. The aqueducts, those miraculous, arched wonders, deliver this water straight into the city, which is great, because otherwise you'd be licking condensation off a tile. Romans take their infrastructure very seriously, even if they occasionally use it to wash armpits in public. By now, your limbs are buzzing in that I work too hard for too little way. You dream of lying down on your straw mattress, which, let's be honest, is just a decorative bag of pokey sadness, and closing your eyes for a solid 8 hours of uninterrupted flea wrestling. But first, you've got to get up 5 flights of dangerously unstable stairs. Because you live in an insula, a Roman apartment building made of wood, mud, and prayer. The higher up you go, the cheaper the rent and the stronger your calves. You climb slowly, each step groaning in protest, past open doorways spilling with noise, garlic, and occasional Latin swear words. At your door, which is more of a wooden suggestion than a security feature, you pause. Something smells like burnt onion. Possibly dinner. Possibly your neighbor's weird herbal incense again. You push inside. Home sweet home. It's one room, one cracked window, and the constant sense that someone else is cooking has invaded your soul. You nod to your spouse, who's trying to boil something edible over a small clay stove. It's either a stew or a potion. Time will tell. The kids are arguing over a lump of bread. The dog is sleeping in the laundry. You have no laundry. The walls are thin. Very thin. You can hear the neighbors sneezing. You can also hear someone in the alley practicing dramatic monologues at full volume. Either an aspiring actor or a man yelling at a wall. Both are common in Rome. You sit down on a wooden stool, which squeaks threateningly under you. You pull off your sandals and empty out the usual mix of pebbles, dust, and possibly one very confused beetle. Your feet sigh in relief. So do you. Then you lean back, stretch, and hit your elbow on the wall because again it's a one-room apartment. If you so much as breathe with enthusiasm, you hit a wall. Outside, the sky is turning a dusky lavender. A breeze drifts in, carrying the scent of frying onions and city dust. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the muffled buzz of the subura at dusk. A baby wails. A cat hisses. Somewhere, a flute squeals like it's in pain. Peaceful chaos. Despite the smells, the noise, and the ever-present danger of a rat uprising, there's something oddly cozy about Roman evenings. You survived another day. You didn't get fined, fired, or trampled by a senator's litter. That's basically a victory. Dinner is served. You get a bowl of pulse, the Roman peasant's mush of choice. It's warm, bland, and vaguely hopeful. There's a strip of salted fish in there somewhere. Probably. You chew slowly, watching your kids flick crumbs at each other. You don't stop them. You barely have the energy to blink. Soon it'll be time to light the oil lamp and pretend that glow makes your home feel less like a fire hazard. You'll all pile into one bed, or straw sack technically, and hope nobody kicks you in the kidneys in their sleep. Again, but for now, for these last golden minutes of twilight, you sit, you rest, you listen. The city hums around you. Rome never truly sleeps. But for one glorious moment, it lets you breathe. You're off the clock. Whatever your job was, baker, bricklayer, or professional mosaic gluer, it's done for the day. Now begins the sacred Roman ritual of avoiding responsibility until sundown. You trudge through cobblestones, wondering if anyone in history has ever had sorer feet. Spoiler, they haven't. Because Roman shoes? They're basically leather pancakes with string. No support, no cushioning. Just raw ambition and a prayer that your soles don't split before you reach your insula. Every step sends a vibration straight up your spine and into your soul. You pass a sign for a sandal repair shop and genuinely consider throwing yourself through the door like a wounded gladiator. But no, you soldier on, because it's Rome. And in Rome, post-work life doesn't mean collapsing on a couch with takeout. It means navigating a city full of people who've also just finished working, who are also cranky, sweaty, and trying to get home before they get roped into helping someone move a goat cart. The streets are jammed. Not with traffic, although yes, carts are a nightmare, but with people. So many people. Rome is packed. 1 million strong and climbing. The narrow alleyways overflow with noise, smells, and small dramas playing out in real time. You see a man shouting about a stolen tunic, a vendor trying to pass off spoiled olives as aged, and a dog dramatically refusing to move from the middle of the road. Classic. You dodge a bucket of bathwater being dumped from a window. Missed you by inches. Congratulations, you've survived another Roman booby trap. A child runs past laughing, a loaf of bread in hand. Possibly stolen, possibly just enthusiastic. You will never know. Eventually, you make it to a relatively calmer street lined with small shops. You duck into one not because you need anything, but because pretending to browse amphora lids gives your legs a break. The shopkeeper nods at you. You nod back. No one speaks. This is the universal language of, we're tired and don't want to be perceived. When you finally reach your insula, you stare up at it like it's Mount Vesuvius. Your apartment is on the 4th floor, which, in Roman terms, means the stairs are narrow, slanted, and statistically likely to crumble beneath you. The good news? The neighbors on the lower floors don't mind you passing through their hallway. The bad news? Their dinner smoke fills the staircase, and now you smell like burnt turnips. Once you reach home and toss your bag, or more accurately your bundle of cloth tied with string, into the corner, you exhale like someone who just survived a chariot crash. And now, with the sun just starting to dip below the rooftops. It's time for phase 2 of the Roman after-work ritual, making yourself busy so no one asks you to do anything else. You might head to the local Popina Rome's version of a wine bar, minus the playlists and plus a 30% chance of bar fight. The wine is cheap, slightly sour and watered down, but it does the job. You sit on a wooden bench, feet stretched out, and listen as the regulars argue over politics, chariot racing, and whether the emperor secretly has donkey ears. You nod along, not because you agree, but because arguing takes energy. If you're not in the mood for wine, you might head to the public baths. Yes, even after work. Especially after work. They're not just for scrubbing off the day's grime. They're the ancient Roman version of a wellness center crossed with a very damp town hall. You undress, shove your belongings into a wall cubby, and join dozens of half-naked strangers in a steamy room full of fog, soap made from ashes, and gossip that flows faster than the water. You catch the tail end of a debate about whether Saturn is angry this month. Someone insists that the bread supply being short is clearly astrological. Another guy swears he saw a senator pick his nose in the forum. You make a mental note to tell your neighbor, who loves political scandal more than food. Feeling slightly cleaner and mildly steamed, you wander back toward home. The streets are quieter now. The vendors have packed up. The shops are shuttered. A poet is reciting something dramatic to a small, bored dog. You consider clapping but decide against it. Let the dog be the judge. As you pass your neighbor's door, you hear the familiar clink of dice and groans of financial regret. Gambling, the eternal Roman pastime. They're probably playing Tali or La Trunculi, games that involve luck, strategy, and usually someone flipping the board in frustration. You're invited in, but decline. You lost 3 tunics and a half fish last week. It's still a sore spot. Back inside your apartment, the air is thick and the floor is warm from the day's heat. You sit by the window, or, more accurately, the rectangular hole with a wooden shutter, and watch the last rays of sunlight melt over the city. Rome glows, not just from the setting sun, but from the flicker of torches, the hum of life, the sheer stubborn will of a million people trying to relax without collapsing. You lean back, stretch your aching shoulders, and breathe in the scent of home. Part bread, part dust, part unidentified neighbor stew. You survived the workday. You survived the commute. You are not doing another single productive thing until sunrise. And that's the true Roman spirit. You don't head straight home. No, you grab a bite from the local thermopolium, basically a Roman fast food joint without the golden arches. It smells like overboiled lentils and last week's meat. You eat standing up. It's quick, greasy, and served with a side of public judgment. The thermopolium is a staple of Roman street life. A horseshoe-shaped counter with deep terracotta jars sunk into it, each filled with something that could legally be called food. Behind the counter stands a man with the look of someone who's seen too much stew and not enough sunlight. He's carving dried fish with the same enthusiasm as a funeral procession. You scan your options. There's pulse, the ever-popular grain porridge that looks like someone tried to boil boredom. There's pickled vegetables, crunchy, sour, and definitely questionable. And then there's the house special. A mystery meat stew that's either lamb, rat, or a very confused pigeon. The vendor won't say. You don't ask. That's the deal. You order a ladle of something steaming and vaguely yellow. It comes in a small bowl made of clay so thin you can see your future through it. You lean against a wall and take a bite. It's hot, salty, and chewy, 3 traits that describe most Roman street food. It might not be gourmet, but it fills the hole in your stomach that's been echoing since noon. Around you, the street pulses with evening activity. Other workers line up, some joking, some just staring into the abyss of their lentil paste. A man next to you slurps down a bowl of garum-soaked greens, Rome's famous fish sauce condiment, and immediately regrets it. You know this because he coughs, swears, and stares into the distance like he's just had a vision. The crowd is a cross-section of Roman society, not the fancy parts. This isn't a senator's villa or a marble dining room with reclining couches and flute players. This is everyday Rome. Noisy, messy, and deeply flavorful. A cobbler's apprentice with soot on his cheeks, a woman in a faded tunic arguing with her son about eating too fast, and a man trying to eat soup while holding a chicken. None of them look like they've had a relaxing day. You're halfway through your bowl when the side eye begins. Not because you've done anything wrong, it's just part of the experience. In Roman street culture, everyone is watching everyone else. Not out of concern, out of sheer nosy curiosity. Who's eating what? Who paid in coins versus bartering with half a turnip? Who dared to ask for less garum? A man 3 stalls down is clearly judging your food choice. He mutters something under his breath about barley being for peasants. You consider pointing out that he's drinking wine from a cracked ladle, but decide to let it go. Street food diplomacy is delicate. You finish your meal and toss the remains into a communal refuse pile that has dreams of becoming a full-blown garbage fire. The city's sanitation system is a miracle of engineering, unless you're standing downwind of it. And tonight, you're downwind of it. There's a small dessert stand nearby. Dessert is a strong word. It's mostly figs and honey cakes hard enough to chip a tooth. You eye the vendor, he eyes you. A silent understanding is reached. You're both too tired to haggle. You buy a honey cake. It's sweet, dense, and oddly comforting, like biting into a warm rock covered in optimism. As you chew, a child runs past carrying a skewer of roasted something, possibly bird, possibly lizard, definitely on fire. He laughs like he's conquered the world. A group of teenage boys gather near the fountain, showing off with juggling, bad singing, and one stolen apple. The apple is passed around like it's gold. Nearby, a man strums a lyre with the emotional intensity of someone who's just been dumped by 4 goddesses at once. You nod along. It's not good, but it's trying, and in Rome, effort counts for something. You spot a taberna across the way, a drinking house that doubles as a tavern, complaint department, and gladiator post-match analysis center. The smell of warm wine and wood smoke drifts toward you. You consider stepping inside for a cup of the city's finest headache in a bowl, but your coin pouch says, maybe not tonight. Instead, you linger by the vendor's stall. The food has settled into your stomach like a polite tenant with questionable paperwork. You feel, okay, not great, but not hungry. In Roman terms, that's a win. One final passerby glances at you. You lock eyes. They nod once, as if to say, yes, I too have eaten the lentils. A bond is formed, and just as quickly it passes. They disappear down a side street, and you are once again just another citizen in the great boiling stew pot that is Rome. You wipe your hands on your tunic, a mistake, because now your tunic smells like anchovy paste and regret. You begin the slow walk back toward home, your stomach full, your pockets lighter, and your dignity mostly intact. Rome may be the heart of an empire, but at street level, it's powered by cheap stew, communal side-eye, and the unbreakable spirit of people who just want to eat in peace. And maybe, just maybe, find a honey cake that doesn't double as a medieval weapon. If you've got a few sesterces and enough energy, it's time for the public baths. Not just for cleaning, no, this is where the gossip flows hotter than the caldarium. You soak, you sweat, you hear 3 different conspiracy theories about the emperor's love life. Classic Tuesday. The baths are less spa and more daily ritual. A strange, glorious combination of hygiene, networking, and accidental nudity. You don't go there to relax. You go there because it's the Roman equivalent of checking your emails, washing your socks, catching up on celebrity news, and accidentally locking eyes with your coworker while you're both naked. The building itself is massive grand columns, mosaics on the floor, and enough marble to make a senator weep with envy. The whole thing is funded by taxes, rich patrons, and the desperate need of every Roman to feel at least mildly clean once a week. You pay your small entry fee and hand your belongings to an atriensis, a slave who guards your stuff. You pray he's not having a bad day. You undress in the apoditerium, or changing room, which is really just a big chamber where everyone pretends not to notice how many holes are in your undertunic. Modesty? This is Rome. You leave it with your sandals. Everyone's naked, or nearly naked, and pretending that it's completely normal to discuss tax reform while air drying. First stop, the tepidarium, the warm room. It's like a gentle Roman hug, warm air, pleasant temperatures, and a few sleepy men already dozing against the walls. This is where you let your muscles ease out of their post-work stiffness. A man next to you is muttering about grain shortages. Another is drawing a crude diagram in the condensation on the wall, explaining why Jupiter is definitely mad at him, personally. Next comes the caldarium, the hot room. It's humid, steaming, and smells faintly of sweat and eucalyptus, which someone definitely snuck in. The walls drip, the tiles threaten to cook your feet. The bath itself is a bubbling cauldron of human soup. You slide in carefully, trying not to scream as the water scorches your shins. Everyone around you is pretending it's comfortable. They lie. You lie too. Inside, the gossip is boiling hot like the water. The man across from you is whispering that the emperor's third cousin was seen eating grapes with a spoon, which everyone agrees is scandalous. Someone else insists that the governor of Sicily has been replaced by a lizard in a toga. You nod thoughtfully, unsure whether you're following the conversation or just about to pass out from heat stroke. Eventually, you escape the sauna of secrets and stumble into the frigidarium, the cold plunge. It hits you like betrayal. The water is ice cold, your pores scream, and your dignity shrinks into oblivion. But the shock clears your mind. You emerge gasping, alive, and suddenly aware that you've just shared a bath with at least one man who once tried to sell you moldy olives. Then comes the strigil session. There's no soap in Rome, not the bubbly kind anyway. Instead, you oil up and scrape the grime off your skin with a curved metal tool called a strigil. If you're lucky, there's a slave to do this for you. If you're not, you fumble through the process like a slippery eel trying to shave its legs. The scraping removes dirt, dead skin, and several of your regrets. It's not glamorous. The oil is cheap, and by the end you feel like a well-greased loaf of bread. But you're clean relatively. Cleaner than you were, at least. And that's the bar. You dry off with a linen cloth that's about as absorbent as a whisper. You sit for a moment in the warm air, letting your skin dry and your nerves settle. A group of elderly men argue over whether the charioteer Scorpus could beat the new champion in a race, and two teenagers are trying to flirt awkwardly near the foot bath. You pretend not to notice. Everyone pretends not to notice. There are vendors wandering around too, selling snacks, wine, even perfume. You buy a dab of rose oil and apply it to your neck. You now smell like a romantic salad. But hey, at least you don't smell like goat sweat and desperation anymore. By now, the bathhouse is glowing with lamplight. The crowd is thinning. People are filing out into the cooling Roman air, refreshed, chatty, and slightly slippery. You collect your belongings from the attendant, who's clearly judged your sandals but says nothing. You step back into the street. The air hits you differently. You're lighter, cleaner, slightly poorer, and somehow more informed about a senator's affair than you ever wanted to be. Your skin tingles, your limbs are loose, and for the first time all day, you don't feel like a walking dust sculpture. Bathing in Rome is never just bathing. It's exposure therapy with bonus trivia. It's where the working class brushes shoulders and everything else with philosophers, merchants, and men who are definitely not spies, despite asking weirdly specific questions about shipping routes. It's sweaty. It's social. It's slightly awkward. And you'll be back tomorrow, invited to a convivium? Lucky you. It's basically a dinner party hosted by someone richer than you, where you lie on your side, try to look elegant, and eat grapes while eavesdropping. The wine flows. The jokes are bad. Someone tries to quote Virgil and forgets halfway through. You arrive in your finest tunic, the one without the suspicious stain shaped like a duck, and immediately regret not bringing a spare. The host's house is massive. Marble steps. Actual columns. A garden with fountains that don't smell like feet. You nod politely at a statue in the atrium, hoping it's not someone important you were supposed to recognize. Inside, the atmosphere is thick with roasted meat, incense, and ego. Slaves bustle about, carrying trays of dates, honey cakes, and jugs of wine that smell like ambition and poor decision-making. You're greeted by the host, who has clearly been sampling the wine since midday and now speaks with the confidence of a man who thinks he invented olives. You're guided to the triclinium, the formal dining room, where the whole evening will unfold like an overacted play. Instead of chairs, there are couches arranged in a U-shape around a low table. You lie on your left side, propped up on a cushion that is both lumpy and alarmingly damp. This is the Roman reclining dining posture. Comfort level. Mild spinal concern. The first course arrives. Eggs, olives, and little cakes made of cheese and herbs. You try to eat gracefully, but reclining while eating is one of those things that sounds elegant in theory and feels like choking hazard practice in reality. Someone coughs mid-bite and spends the next 5 minutes blinking in silence while everyone pretends not to notice. There's a loud cheer from the other couch. Someone made a joke involving Neptune and bad plumbing. You didn't hear the setup, but laugh anyway. That's part of the ritual. Eat what's served, laugh when others laugh, and hope the entertainment doesn't involve you getting up to recite something. More food arrives. Now it's roasted dormice. Yes, actual mice, stuffed with pine nuts and honey. You take a small bite. It's surprisingly crunchy. The texture is nightmare adjacent, but you nod politely. Across from you, someone is whispering that the host is in debt to a local fishmonger. Scandal. You mentally file it for later. The wine is flowing freely now. Roman wine is strong but always watered down unless someone's trying to make a point or forget their last 10 years. You sip cautiously. The man next to you has already declared his undying love for Saturn and is currently trying to toast the ceiling. With the main course comes even more theatrics. The host claps his hands and in comes a lute player who looks like he owes several people money. He begins to play. It's fine. Everyone stares into the middle distance and sways slightly. One guest begins to sob softly. No one reacts. Then comes the poetry. A slightly too eager man begins reciting Virgil. He gets through the first 4 lines beautifully, then forgets the 5th and invents something about bees and the moon. You nod, impressed. Not by the poem but by the sheer confidence. The servants begin clearing plates and bringing out dessert. Honey-glazed fruit, sweet wine, and flat cakes so dry they could absorb a shipwreck. You eat 3. Social anxiety is delicious. Gossip levels are now at full boil. A woman with 10 rings on each hand whispers that her cousin once saw a senator shaving his legs. Another insists the emperor's astrologer is faking the star charts. A third claims she personally knows someone who once touched Cleopatra's scarf. You've no idea who's telling the truth, but the drama is exquisite. You glance around the room and realize one of the couches is gone. Stolen? Moved? It's unclear. A very drunk man is sitting on a decorative urn, humming to himself. No one stops him. This too is part of the evening. Someone passes you more wine. You pretend to sip. You've reached that magical phase of the party where time loses meaning. The food has blurred into a soft, honey-coated memory, and you're half listening to a man explaining why the moon is actually a god with dietary preferences. Eventually, the host stands and slurs something poetic about friendship and the sacred bonds of Roman hospitality. It ends with him tripping on a bowl of olives and laughing for a full minute. Everyone claps. You do too, partly because you're genuinely amused, and partly because clapping distracts from the fact that your leg has gone completely numb from reclining too long. As the evening winds down, guests begin to stagger out into the moonlight. A few stay behind, either too drunk or too dramatic to leave. You thank your host, who is now speaking fluent nonsense, and make your way to the door, head spinning slightly, stomach full of mystery meats and questionable poetry. Outside, Rome is quiet. You take a deep breath of night air and try to remember how to walk normally after 4 hours of eating sideways. You feel full, slightly wiser, and mildly concerned about whether you just agreed to a chariot race at dawn. But one thing's certain, Roman dinner parties are unforgettable. Whether you remember them or not is an entirely different matter. Not everyone has access to figs and flamingo tongues. Your dinner? Pulls a beige, unsalted grain mush with maybe a chickpea if the gods are kind. Your spouse sighs. The kids fight. The family goat stares. A typical Roman night in. The table, if you can call it that, is a rickety wooden slab propped up by one stable leg and a stack of amphora shards. You and your family sit around it on mismatched stools, broken crates, and what might actually be an upside-down helmet from your cousin's brief, tragic gladiator phase. The pulse is ladled into shared clay bowls, each one chipped, stained, and carrying the distinct scent of past meals, memories, and mild mildew. The meal is quiet at first, tired quiet, the kind of silence that follows a long day of physical labor, child wrangling, and goat herding, all while trying not to inhale too deeply around the communal latrine. Your spouse stirs the pulse like they're hoping a miracle fish will appear. One of the kids pokes at theirs like it might explode. The other one just eats with their hands. You're too tired to argue. You take your first bite. It's warm, slightly sticky, and tastes like, well, boiled humility. That's the thing about pulse. It doesn't taste like anything unless you really believe it does. Occasionally you add herbs or drizzle a little olive oil on top if it's payday. Tonight is not one of those nights. Still, it fills you up, sort of. It fills the emotional space where food should go. You chew slowly, watching steam rise from the bowl, trying to imagine it's a rich stew or a honey-roasted something. It's not. It's beige. It's always beige. You glance up and make eye contact with the goat, who is, once again, standing uncomfortably close to the table. Her name is Minerva, ironic, considering she routinely walks into walls. She snorts, unimpressed by the menu. Honestly, fair. Someone knocks over a cup. Water spills. The kids argue. You mop it up with a corner of your tunic that was already damp from some mystery sauce. Domestic bliss, Roman style. Meanwhile, the apartment creaks under the weight of the day. Your insula is not exactly a model of architectural integrity. The ceiling leaks in places when it rains. The walls are thin enough to hear your neighbors sneeze and judge their diet based on it. From upstairs comes the familiar sound of someone dragging something heavy across the floor for no reason. Or possibly bowling. You've stopped asking. Your spouse sighs again, louder this time. A sigh that carries the weight of 30 years of pulse and inconsistent grain rations. They mention, in passing, that the neighbors had dried figs last week. Dried figs. Luxury. You nod solemnly, acknowledging the political injustice of dried fruit. To distract yourself, you pick up a small wooden spoon and tap it against your bowl rhythmically. The kids join in, turning it into a spontaneous concert of clinks and clanks, until your spouse silences the room with a look that says, "If you love me, you'll stop percussion." Eventually, the conversation turns to tomorrow's errands. You'll have to go to the market early if you want the good bread, the stuff that doesn't shatter on contact. The kids need new sandals, but you'll probably just stuff the holes with cloth again. And Minerva has somehow chewed through the doorframe. Again, after the last bite of pulse is forced down, you scrape your bowl clean. Not because you're still hungry, okay? Yes, because you're still hungry, but also because that bowl will double as your water cup later. Multifunctionality is the backbone of peasant innovation. Cleanup is quick. The scraps go to Minerva, who looks personally offended that there aren't more. The bowls are rinsed with a trickle of stored water and stacked by the hearth. A faint smell of smoke still lingers from last week's failed attempt to roast something for a change. Now that the eating's done, there's a brief window of peace. The kids are gnawing on fig pits they found outside. Your spouse is staring into the middle distance with the blank expression of someone trying to remember if there's any wine left. You lean back, legs stretched, the warmth of the hearth licking your ankles. Outside, the Subura hums. Distant voices argue about chickens. A flute plays a single note repeatedly. Somewhere, someone yells, "That's not your goat," followed by the sound of frantic hoofbeats. Back inside, you listen to the sounds of your own home, the crackle of the fire, the rhythmic scratching of your spouse writing something on a wax tablet, the occasional snore from Minerva, who has apparently claimed your blanket. Dinner may not be exciting, but it's dependable. It's predictable. And in a city where the forum is full of politics and half the aqueducts leak, there's something deeply comforting about knowing your family will always gather around the table, even if the table is slightly collapsing and smells like damp grain. You stand, stretch, and feel your spine make a sound not unlike a dying lyre. The kids are still bickering. You pretend not to hear. Minerva has laid down in your sleeping spot again. You pretend not to see. As night falls and the glow of oil lamps flickers on in the windows above, you realize something strange. You're content. Maybe it's the fullness. Maybe it's the exhaustion. Maybe it's just that you survived another day. Beige pulse and all. Roman children didn't have bedtime routines. They had "stop climbing the statue of Mars before your father loses his mind" routines. They played games, made noise, and occasionally ran errands like buying stale bread or chasing down a runaway chicken. There were no lullabies, no glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and certainly no winding down with a screen. Unless you count watching your neighbors fight about taxes as entertainment, which honestly Roman kids definitely did. Bedtime was less of a rule and more of a hope, like maybe the child will eventually collapse from sheer chaos. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, Roman streets didn't quiet down, they got smaller, darker, and more child-sized. The alleyways became labyrinths of adventure. Roman kids emerged from the shadows like tiny, tunic-clad gremlins, ready to spend their remaining energy reserves doing things their parents definitely did not approve of. Games were a big part of the nighttime routine. Pebble games, knucklebones, spinning tops, and chasing each other with sticks that may or may not have been swords in a past life. You haven't truly lived until you've heard the high-pitched screech of a child yelling, "I'm Julius Caesar," while leaping off a crate and knocking over a barrel of olives. Some kids would play Micatio, a kind of finger-counting guessing game, like ancient rock, paper, scissors, but louder and with more arguing. Others made up songs that were mostly just nonsense words, shouted repeatedly until a neighbor told them to go to bed, or threatened to throw a sandal. And if you think children whisper at night, let me assure you Roman children had no volume control. The walls of most homes were so thin you could hear your neighbor sneeze. So when the kids started screaming about their pebble collection or which god was coolest, everyone within a 5-building radius got to participate in the debate. But kids weren't just playing, oh no. Parents saw free labor and seized the opportunity. Older children were often sent on errands after dark because if you forgot the bread, you still needed the bread, and the bakery didn't care about your bedtime. So off they went, clutching a few coins, muttering under their breath about injustice, and promising not to drop the loaf in the gutter this time. And yes, sometimes the errand wasn't just bread. Sometimes it was, go find your brother. He took the goat again. Or, run to the taberna and tell your father to please come home before he starts loudly reciting Homer again. Or the classic, catch that chicken. No, not that chicken, the one that belongs to us. There were no flashlights, just a candle if you were lucky. And most Roman streets weren't lit. So kids navigated by torchlight, moonlight, or just pure, unearned confidence. They learned to identify neighbors by sound, dodge puddles by smell, and avoid alley cats based purely on instinct. Inside the home, if they were finally wrangled back in, the children would usually collapse into straw bedding or roll up in whatever blanket-like object wasn't currently claimed by the family goat. There was no designated children's room. There was a room. Everyone slept in it. The concept of privacy was laughable. You wanted privacy? Go hide behind the water jug. Parents tried their best, of course. Some told stories, moral tales about gods and monsters, cautionary fables about hubris and thievery, or, more commonly, complete nonsense invented on the spot to make their kid lie down. If you don't sleep, Bacchus will sneak in and turn your sandals into grapes, was a totally valid threat. There were lullabies, occasionally, but they sounded less like Twinkle Twinkle and more like If you don't sleep, I swear by Juno's eyebrows we are skipping breakfast. Soft humming was optional, bribery was standard, and despite all the yelling, the games, and the general sense that children were tiny tornadoes in sandals, Roman parents loved their kids in that tough, you will survive or else kind of way. Childhood was short. Most children didn't live to adulthood, and those who did were expected to start helping with family labor early. So when they played, they really played loud, wild, and like the night itself was daring them not to grow up. Eventually the chaos would subside. A pebble would be dropped. A child would yawn so hard they accidentally fell over. The house would grow quieter. One by one the children would settle into uneven piles of fabric and dreams. The final child would sit staring at the oil lamp, eyes heavy, muttering something about how they weren't even tired yet, then immediately faceplant into their sister's foot. Success. Outside, the city never fully slept. But inside, the noise dimmed. A goat snored. A parent whispered a final, "No, you can't have water for the night." And the great miracle of bedtime, Roman edition, finally took hold. Because even in ancient Rome, even without lullabies or nightlights, kids eventually ran out of steam. And thank the gods for that. There's no electricity. Your evening is lit by flickering oil lamps that smell faintly of regret. You try to read a wax tablet but give up because the lighting makes everything look like it's been smeared in olive oil. Because it has. The Roman oil lamp, the humble lucerna, is a miracle of ancient engineering, if your definition of miracle includes constantly tipping over, dripping everywhere, and setting your sleeve on fire. It's a small clay vessel, filled with olive oil, with a wick sticking out like it's trying to escape. You light it with a flint or someone else's borrowed flame, and boom, ambiance. The flickering glow gives everything a moody, dramatic atmosphere, which sounds romantic until you realize you're just trying to find your other sandal, and the lamp keeps casting unsettling goat-shaped shadows on the wall. You adjust the wick with a small bronze hook, a delicate process involving the finesse of a sculptor and the patience of a monk. Too high and it smokes like you're summoning Jupiter. Too low, and it dies with a sad sputter, leaving you in darkness and your pinky finger mildly scorched. The oil itself? Olive, of course. Not the fancy kind that's for rich folks and dinner guests. Your lamp oil is thick, yellowish, and smells like something that's been through several moral compromises. It leaks if you even think about moving the lamp. So most Romans just carry the flame from one room to another using a small torch, a helpful child, or both. And here's the kicker. Everything in your home is flammable. The wooden floors? Flammable. The reed mattress? Flammable. Your tunic? A walking fire hazard. Your neighbor's drapes that keep wafting into your window? Flammable and tacky. There's a reason why fire was one of Rome's biggest fears, and why the Vigiles, Rome's version of firefighters, were both admired and constantly yelled at for being late. So you sit, in the dim glow of your trusty oil lamp, squinting at your wax tablet. You're trying to rework a shopping list from earlier you wrote. Lentils, fish, wine, emergency fig. But now it looks like lemurs, fist, wine, enemy pig. You stare, you blink, you give up. Across the room, your spouse is patching a tunic with the enthusiasm of someone who's done this too many times. They also have an oil lamp, but theirs is worse. The flame keeps guttering out every time they sigh, which is often. The kids are asleep in the corner, or at least pretending to be. One eye always cracks open at the sound of any snack wrapper being touched. Minerva, the goat, has somehow parked herself near your lamp again, and you gently push her back before she becomes a living torch. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you get access to a candelabrum, a metal stand with several oil lamps mounted at different heights. It's like a Roman chandelier, but more local tavern than imperial villa. Yours was made by your cousin and is slightly crooked. It works when it wants to. Outside, the streets are dark. Completely. Rome has no public streetlights. If you need to go somewhere at night, you carry your own torch or hire a lantern bearer if you're fancy. Otherwise, you stumble blindly, praying to every god you don't fall into a puddle, a thief, or a pile of something the baker's mule left behind. The shadows move constantly. Light flickers across your walls, turning every crack in the plaster into what looks like a ghostly face or a warning from the underworld. You remind yourself, it's just shadows, or possibly your neighbor's weird statue collection again. There's a certain calm to it, though. The warm, golden glow, the silence of the home, the tiny flame holding back the darkness. You start to understand why Romans wrote poetry by lamplight, even if most of it was about wine, war, or mildly inappropriate gods. You think about writing something too, until your wax stylus slips, and you accidentally draw a very unfortunate goat. Eventually the oil begins to run low. The flame shortens, the light dims. You consider refilling it, but the oil jar is across the room, and getting up means waking the kids. Stepping on something sharp, or knocking into Minerva, none of those are worth it. So you sit, watching the flame flutter like it's trying to make its final exit dramatic, which it does. One last puff of smoke. Darkness. You're now lit by whatever moonlight slips through the shutters, which is to say, almost nothing. You shuffle toward bed, stubbing your toe twice, stepping on a wooden doll once, and landing squarely on the tail of a sleeping cat that wasn't yours until just now. Your home goes quiet. The city outside hums faintly. A distant shout, a dog barking, a neighbor cursing his lamp. You lie down on your straw mattress, the scent of smoke still in your nose, and feel the dark wrap around you like a slightly judgmental blanket. In a world with no switches, no overhead lights, and definitely no mood dimmers, Romans lived by flame and flicker dancing shadows, smoky air, and just enough glow to get through another night without burning down the insula. Sleep well, fire hazard. What did you sleep in? Whatever you didn't burn during the day. A tunic, maybe. Maybe not. Romans weren't big on pajamas. The richer you were, the more fabric you wore to bed. The poorer you were, the more likely you slept in your birthday suit and called it fashion. There was no drawer labeled comfy sleepwear. No flannel pants. No worn-out t-shirt from the gladiator games of 22 BCE. Your options were limited to what you had. What was clean? Unlikely. And what didn't smell like goat? Very unlikely. You didn't so much get ready for bed as collapse into it and hope your tunic didn't catch on something sharp on the way down. If you were middle class, lucky enough to afford a second tunic, but not enough to afford dignity, you might strip off your day clothes and throw on a thinner, slightly less crusty version for sleep. It's made of linen, maybe, if you're fancy. Wool, if you're not. Either way, it's scratchy, slightly damp from earlier sweat, and smells like a combination of dust and ambition. Richer Romans had options. Oh yes. They could afford synthesis loose evening garments meant for lounging around after dinner and pretending to understand poetry. Some even had embroidered sleepwear, decorated with flowers or mythical scenes. Imagine snoozing in a toga embroidered with Jupiter smiting your insomnia. Now that's power. Of course, the really rich didn't need sleepwear. They had slaves to heat their bedrooms, fluff their straw mattresses, and fetch hot wine if they couldn't drift off immediately. You, on the other hand, are sleeping next to a wall that weeps condensation and a goat that keeps trying to lick your feet. And many Romans, especially those in the lower classes, simply didn't bother with clothes at all. Too hot in the summer, too expensive to waste, and honestly, after a day of hauling bricks or shouting about fish prices, who has the energy to fashion a matching sleep set? Sleeping naked was practical. Fabric was valuable. Laundry was rare. So if you slept in the nude, it wasn't scandalous. It was efficient. The scandal came when you had to jump out of bed to chase a rat and forgot you weren't wearing pants. That's how legends are born. Beds themselves weren't always the soft, inviting havens we imagine. Most Romans slept on simple wooden frames with a rope lattice and a straw-stuffed mattress. The ropes creaked, the straw poked you in places no straw should ever touch, and you probably shared the space with your spouse, your kids, and possibly an in-law who overstayed their welcome during Saturnalia and just never left. Blankets were coarse wool or woven reeds, depending on how kind Fortuna was feeling that month. There was no thermostat, no weighted blanket, and no fuzzy socks, just layers. And if it got really cold, you'd sleep in your daytime tunic, under your winter tunic, wrapped in your cousin's tunic, while curled around a dog that may or may not belong to you. If you were a soldier, a traveler, or just terribly unlucky, you might be sleeping outside under the stars, beside the road, possibly in the company of some judgmental geese. In that case, your nightwear was whatever armor or cloak you didn't lose that day. Bonus points if you remembered to roll up your cloak to use as a pillow instead of a goat lure. Children didn't get special night clothes either. They wore what they had, or nothing at all. Which honestly made nighttime potty issues even more of an adventure. Parents simply accepted that waking up damp was just part of the journey. And of course there was no getting up to use the bathroom. The communal chamber pot was under the bed, or near the bed, or possibly already in use by your brother. You aimed in the dark and hoped for the best. Indoor plumbing? That was for bathhouses, temples, and dreams. So what did bedtime look like in Rome? A family huddled together in one small room, dimly lit by a dying oil lamp, breathing in the scent of warm wool, damp straw, and the neighbor's lentil stew that somehow seeps through the walls. You lie back in whatever state of undress you can afford, curl your legs to avoid the cold patch where the ceiling drips, and try not to think about the fact that your bed squeaks like an angry duck. You hear the city settling creaking wood, distant footsteps, someone yelling about a missing sandal. You pull the coarse blanket over your shoulders, trying to ignore the rough texture on your face. You think longingly of silk, then remember you once touched silk in the market and nearly sneezed from its sheer audacity. And just when you're about to drift off, the goat sneezes directly into your armpit. You sigh. Welcome to Roman nightwear. Fashion meets function meets mild betrayal. So yes, clothing was optional. But chaos? Chaos was standard. You live in a creaky, multi-story apartment called an insula. It's noisy, wobbly, and smells like old fish and neighbor drama. Walls are thin. Floors are thinner. If your upstairs neighbor sneezes, your ceiling falls in. The insulae are Rome's version of affordable housing. If affordable includes structural instability, fire hazards, and the constant emotional threat of eavesdropping. Built high and packed tight, these apartment blocks cram dozens of families into a space smaller than your modern studio. You've got neighbors above, below, to the left, the right, and probably inside your walls. It's intimate, in a deeply uncomfortable way. Your own apartment is on the third floor, a prime location if you enjoy carrying water up steep stairs every day and listening to the rhythmic creaking of timbers that may or may not hold through the night. The lower floors are for the wealthy. Stone walls, private toilets, maybe even a small kitchen. You're up here in Timberland, where everything is wood, flammable, and one poorly thrown amphora away from collapse. At night, the insula comes alive. Not in a festive, romantic way. In a, why is someone pounding grain at 10 p.m. way. The walls offer zero soundproofing. You can hear the couple next door arguing over chickpeas. A child upstairs singing the same song about a goose for the third hour straight, and someone below you sobbing into what sounds like a stale piece of bread. You try to tune it out, lying on your straw mattress, which is suspiciously lumpy in places you're afraid to investigate. The wooden frame creaks beneath you like it's considering early retirement. A breeze sneaks through a crack in the wall, bringing with it the scent of anchovies, smoke, and that one neighbor who always overdoes it on the garum. Speaking of which, the neighbor downstairs is cooking something. You can tell because your floor is now gently steaming. It smells like burnt cabbage and ambition. You wonder briefly if it's meant to be food or a warning. Lighting is minimal. Your single oil lamp flickers against the cracked plaster, throwing dramatic shadows across your 1.5-room empire. You own exactly 2 pieces of furniture, the bed and a stool that doubles as a table, a stepladder, and a very uncomfortable pillow if needed. The rest of your belongings are neatly stacked in a corner, trying their best not to collapse under the weight of dust and mild despair. Space is tight. You share your room with your spouse, your kids, and possibly your cousin, depending on how long his just a few nights visit has dragged on. Personal space is more of a concept than a reality. You sleep shoulder to shoulder, toe to elbow, and sometimes cheek to goat if Minerva decides to sneak inside again. There is no bathroom. There is a chamber pot. It is not elegant. And if you forget to empty it in the morning, you will get passive-aggressive side-eye from every person in your stairwell. The floors groan as someone upstairs starts pacing. You assume it's the man with heavy sandals and a complete disregard for gravity. Each step sends vibrations through your ceiling. You count them like sheep. 72 steps later, he stops. You do not thank him. You simply update your mental list of neighbors you'll ignore at the next Saturnalia party. You close your eyes. You try to sleep. But now the couple across the hall is having what sounds like a lively discussion about lentil portions. It escalates quickly. A pot shatters. The goat bleats. Somewhere far off, a dog barks in agreement. Eventually the building settles or gives up. The last oil lamps sputter out. Conversations fade. A few final coughs, snores, and whispered threats echo in the night, and then stillness. Not silence. Rome is never silent, but stillness. The kind where you can finally hear your own thoughts and immediately wish you couldn't. You lie back, staring at the cracked ceiling. You wonder how many people have slept in this same spot. How many have heard the same distant flute, the same upstairs stomping, the same whispered prayers to sleep just a little longer before dawn breaks and life starts all over again. The insula is flawed, noisy, and constantly threatening to collapse, but it's home. It's where life happens. Where neighbors fight, babies cry, bread burns, and gossip flows like bad wine. It's where you share space, stories, and sometimes socks. And despite everything, the squeaky bed, the goat, the mysterious puddle near the window, there's something oddly comforting about it all. A chaotic symphony of daily Roman life, playing softly as you drift into dreams. Or at least, you almost drift off. until your cousin rolls over, kicks you in the shin, and mumbles something about needing more barley. Good night, insula. May your beams hold. And your neighbors run out of things to argue about. There's no memory foam. Your mattress is a sack of straw that sounds like you're sleeping on a bag of potato chips. Sheets? If you're lucky. If not, you just wrap yourself in fabric and try not to think about lice. Bedtime in ancient Rome isn't about comfort. It's about compromise. The bed is a wooden frame, rickety from too many nights of supporting Roman anxieties and goats. The ropes underneath creak like they're whispering secrets of impending collapse. On top sits your lectus, a mattress stuffed with straw, old wool, the occasional feather, and whatever the goat wasn't using. The straw is dry, brittle, and absolutely refuses to stay in place. Every movement sounds like you're trying to sneak through a field of particularly judgmental celery. You shift slightly, crunch. You breathe too hard, crunch. You blink with intent, crunch. You try fluffing it, you try punching it. You even try the ancient Roman method of aggressively ignoring it. Nothing works. The lump in the middle has become sentient and may be trying to unionize. If you're wealthier or know someone in textiles, your mattress might be filled with wool instead. Softer, yes, but also warmer, itchier, and guaranteed to smell faintly of something you can't identify and don't want to. And then there are the sheets. Or, more accurately, sheet, singular, if you're fortunate enough to own one. It's linen, if you're rich. A worn piece of canvas if you're not. And if you're particularly stylish, goat hair blanket. Yes, it's scratchy. Yes, it smells. But it's yours, and that's what counts. Before you even lie down, you do the classic Roman ritual, the critter check. You lift the edge of the blanket, give it a little shake, and hope no beetles, lice, or small rodents have decided to call it home. It's not paranoia, it's habit. The last time you skipped this, you woke up with a cricket in your ear and trust issues. Some households add herbs to the mattress, stuffing bay leaves, lavender, or rue, not for aesthetics, but to ward off lice and other nighttime visitors. You once tried rosemary. Now your mattress smells like dinner, and you're always vaguely hungry when you lie down. And then there's the pillow, or as you call it, cloth-wrapped disappointment. It's stuffed with feathers if you're lucky, with straw if you're not, and with regret if you live above the fish market. You thump it into shape, wedge it under your neck, and pretend it's supportive. You lie down, trying to find the one position where your spine doesn't sound like it's being punished for something. You twist, you turn, you scoot to the edge, where the straw is less lumpy and more mildly forgiving. The mattress responds with a symphony of squeaks. Meanwhile, Minerva the goat is watching you from the foot of the bed, chewing a piece of your blanket with the slow, menacing confidence of a creature that knows you're too tired to stop her. Sometimes, when it's cold, you share body heat with the family, with the pets, and with whatever hot rock you manage to sneak from the hearth. You tuck it into the folds of your bedding like a prehistoric electric blanket. Occasionally, it escapes and burns your thigh. Tradition. Sharing the bed is standard. There are no his and hers mattresses. There is, this half is warmer, and I called dibs on the wall side. You sleep next to your spouse, your children, your cousin visiting from Ostia, and probably a cat you've never met before. You try to stretch out, but the straw is unforgiving. It pokes you in the ribs. It pokes you in your dignity. You curl into the fetal position, mutter a quick prayer to Somnus, the god of sleep, and immediately get elbowed in the back by a dreaming child. Eventually your body goes numb to the lumps. The scratching blends into the background. The air is warm from shared breath, and the occasional breeze from the window carries the scent of nightwood smoke, distant bread, and someone's unfortunate attempt at perfume. You almost drift off until a piece of straw stabs you under the kneecap. You groan. You shift. You roll the straw mattress like a human burrito, retucking the blanket and whispering threats at the lump near your foot. But despite it all, the straw, the goat hair, the elbow in your spine, you find yourself easing into sleep, because you're tired, because the day was long, because Romans may not have had tempopedic, but they did have exhaustion, which turns anything flat into a luxury. And so you dream hopefully of warm baths, fig trees and beds that don't rustle like a snack bag every time you breathe. Sleep tight, And maybe next week, you'll finally restuff that mattress. Or at least move the lump. Maybe, before bed, you brush your teeth with a stick. Maybe rub some ash on them if you're fancy. Your breath smells like wine and anchovies, but honestly, so does everyone else's. Toothpaste as you know it doesn't exist. Fluoride? Unheard of. Dental floss? Please. This is Rome, not a spa. What you have instead is a small, frayed twig. Maybe it's from a mastic tree. If you're lucky, mildly minty, mildly effective. Mostly just a wooden Q-tip for your mouth. You chew on the end until it splits, creating a kind of bristly brush. It's functional, in a "this will probably not kill me immediately" kind of way. You run the twig across your teeth with enthusiasm and a touch of desperation, hoping to scrub away the evidence of roasted dormice and regret. To really freshen up, you might dip it in some crushed charcoal or powdered bone. You've heard rumors about using powdered deer antler, but you're not that committed to oral hygiene. Ash from burnt bread is more your speed. Bonus. You already have plenty of that lying around. If you're very rich, there are imported tooth powders. Some are made with crushed oyster shells. Others include things like powdered pumice or, tragically, vinegar and salt. This, somehow, is considered high-end. It's like exfoliating your enamel. You tried it once and spent the next 3 days flinching every time the wind hit your teeth. Mouthwash? Kind of. Romans believed urine, yes. Urine was good for whitening teeth. The ammonia content was supposedly excellent for cleaning. So people would rinse with Portuguese urine, the fanciest variety. Because prestige? You don't partake. You'd rather just keep your anchovy breath, thanks. There's no mirror in your apartment, unless you're absurdly wealthy. So your nightly dental routine is done by running your tongue across your teeth to check for grime, poking at suspicious spots, and muttering a quiet prayer to the household gods that nothing hurts too much. Tooth pain is a real fear. Dentists are scarce, and the treatments available are intense. If you have a cavity, there's no filling it. If it gets infected, it's coming out by force, with pliers, or in some truly ancient cases, with a sharp stick and a strong friend. Anesthetic, that's what wine is for, or unconsciousness. So you take your twig, scrub with gusto, and spit discreetly into a broken pot in the corner. Minerva the goat watches you, unimpressed. She licks the wall, which is somehow still more hygienic than the guy down the street who cleans his teeth with old fish scales. Children follow your lead badly. They chew their twigs, forget to brush the back teeth, and usually spend more time sword fighting with the sticks than using them correctly. You yell something about back molars, and your youngest responds by accidentally hitting you in the knee. It's fine. At least they're not eating the ash again. For the Romans, dental care wasn't about perfection, it was about maintenance. Teeth were tools. You used them to rip bread, tear meat, and occasionally hold nails if your hands were full. You wanted them intact. White teeth weren't just a beauty standard. They were a sign you hadn't been cursed by some minor deity for stealing figs as a child. Some wealthier Romans did worry about appearances. There are records of people whitening their teeth, and even attempting primitive braces using gold wire. Gold. For teeth. You once tied a bit of string around your sore incisor, and ended up with a black eye from tripping over the goat mid-floss. There's no bedtime mint, no bubblegum flavor, no floss picks or water sprays. There's just you, your splintering twig, and the hope that the wine haze from earlier will numb whatever dental issue you're actively ignoring. You finish brushing, spit once more, and drop the twig into a small pot where it will be reused until it becomes too soft, too splintery, or too haunted by past meals. You wipe your mouth on the back of your hand, or a rag if you're feeling classy. Then it's time for a final inspection. You run your tongue across your teeth. They're not smooth, exactly, but they're not worse. Which, in ancient Rome, is basically winning. You yawn. The wine breath is still strong. So is the anchovy. But your spouse also smells like wine and anchovy. So does the goat. So do your neighbors. So, probably, does the emperor. There's no shame in it. Just shared humanity. And possibly gingivitis. You blow out the oil lamp. The room dims. The creaky bed calls. And as you curl up in your blanket of straw and existential dread, you make one last mental note. Tomorrow, buy more twigs, and maybe avoid the fish guy. Can't sleep? Go out. Watch a puppet show. Gamble in a smoky taberna. Listen to that guy on the corner who insists he saw a ghost in the forum. Entertainment is a coin toss, sometimes literally. Evening in Rome isn't just about winding down. It's when the city gets weird. The markets close, the sun vanishes behind the rooftops, and suddenly the streets are full of people who all should probably be in bed, but aren't. You're one of them. Because sleep is for senators and goats. You need a distraction. First stop, the puppet show. It's set up in the street, lit by a couple of oil lamps and one torch that's dangerously close to someone's hair. The puppeteer is half actor, half shouting philosopher, and fully convinced this is high art. The puppets are made of rags and wood, with painted faces that are either charming or mildly cursed. The story? A classic. Jupiter disguises himself, tricks someone, and chaos ensues. The moral is unclear. Possibly don't trust gods in disguise. Possibly don't sit too close, the puppet just hit someone in the eye. You clap politely. Or maybe you just swat away a mosquito. Either way, the show ends with one puppet falling over dramatically, and the audience collectively nodding like they've just witnessed something profound, or at least better than being home. If you're feeling rowdier, there's always the taberna. Every neighborhood has one a hole in the wall with mismatched stools, cloudy wine, and more rumors than customers. You push open the door and are immediately hit by the smell of boiled onions, bad decisions, and a strong undertone of don't touch anything. Inside, the dice game is already going. Tali and tesserae Roman dice, not quite cubes, usually uneven, and known for mysteriously favoring whoever bought the drinks. You join in. The rules are vague. The stakes are low. Or high. It depends on whether you win, or whether you understand Latin numbers after 3 cups of wine. A man next to you claims he once beat a Praetorian guard at this game. The barkeeper snorts. The dice clatter on the table. You get 2 sixes and a weird look from the guy across from you. He's missing a tooth, and may or may not be named Wolf. You decide to call it a draw. Further down the street, there's music. Kind of. It's a man with a tibia, a Roman double-pipe flute, playing something that sounds like a goat yodeling underwater. People toss him coins, or bread, or heckles. He keeps playing. You have to respect the confidence. Another corner, another story. This time it's the local mad prophet, or as he calls himself, a very emotionally honest visionary. He's talking about the ghost he saw near the basilica. Tall, glowing, wearing sandals 2 sizes too big, possibly a lost soul, possibly someone drunk in a toga. People gather, not because they believe him, but because there's nothing on TV, mostly because TV hasn't been invented yet, so they listen, laugh, question him loudly, and argue about whether ghosts wear belts. It's weirdly comforting. If you've got a few extra sesterces, you might treat yourself to a more refined night, a dirt floor performance in a makeshift theatre. Someone's courtyard with folding chairs and a wooden stage that leans suspiciously to the left. Tonight's play? A tragedy. Of course, a nobleman falls in love with a woman who turns out to be his long-lost cousin, or maybe a disguised sea nymph. It's hard to hear over the guy selling honeyed nuts in the back. The actors are dramatic, the wigs are very visible, and the chorus keeps tripping over a chicken that wandered onto the stage. You love it, you hate it. You stay till the end. The crowd disperses slowly, chatting about the performance, the wine, and whether the lead actor was supposed to fall into the decorative fountain or if that was improvised. You overhear someone say, "It wasn't as good as last week's snake handler, but better than the mime who cried." You head home through the lantern-lit streets, the stones slick with spilled wine and ambition. The city smells like wet stone, roasted meat, and a slight hint of philosophical disappointment. You pass a couple arguing in front of a bakery, 2 kids chasing a dog, and someone asleep on a bench holding a tambourine like it's a baby. Rome doesn't sleep early, and when it does, it tosses and turns. You reach your insula, climb the stairs, and hear someone above you loudly reciting lines from the puppet show. You smile. Maybe drama's not so bad after all. Back inside, the lamp is still glowing, Your bed is still lumpy. Minerva the goat has claimed your blanket. Again, but you're full of laughter, of wine, of stories that may or may not be true. And tomorrow, you'll probably hear the ghost story again, this time with 3 ghosts and a donkey. That's Roman nightlife. And honestly, not bad. Nature calls. The chamber pot answers. You use it. You hope no one else trips over it in the dark. The smell, familiar, comforting in a weird way. Like home. If your home is a urinal, there is no bathroom. There is no plumbing. There is definitely no midnight stroll to a sparkling porcelain oasis. What you have is the humble chamber pot. A ceramic bowl of dreams and deeply questionable hygiene tucked discreetly under the bed. Or not so discreetly. It might be in the corner. It might be behind a curtain. It might be next to your cousin, who's using it as a footrest without realizing what it is. You wake up in the middle of the night. You try to ignore it. You fail. The need is urgent. Bladder full. House silent. Except for that one snoring goat. You don't light a lamp. That's risky. One puff of wind, and suddenly you're on fire, and not in a fun, victorious way. No. You navigate by memory. You know exactly how many steps it is to the pot. 3 to the left, 1 forward, pivot near the wall crack. Avoid the doll. Try not to bump the bed frame. And whatever you do, do not kick the cat. You fumble. You reach. You find it. And then you hover over it, praying to every household deity that your aim is good, that the pot hasn't tipped over, and that your cousin didn't already fill it beyond capacity. You finish your sacred duty and exhale like a victorious gladiator. Crisis averted. Until morning, because you will forget it's there, or someone else will. And in the chaos of a groggy morning, someone, probably the child who never listens, will knock it over. A splash, a shriek, a smell, a lecture about respecting pottery. And suddenly, everyone is awake. The pot itself is usually made of clay, sometimes metal. It's dented, cracked, and always just a little too warm. There's a small handle which you pretend makes it easier to carry, but mostly just makes it easier to imagine throwing out the window at a particularly noisy neighbor. There are rules, of course. Unspoken ones. Whoever fills it empties it, unless they deny it. Then it becomes a family debate, complete with eyewitness testimony, finger-pointing, and a trial by smell. If you're wealthy, you might have a servant who handles this for you. But if you're in a regular insula, it's all hands and, unfortunately, all noses on deck. In the morning, someone, usually you, unless you successfully fake sleep, carries the pot downstairs to dump it in the public latrine or the alley's designated shame corner. You pass 5 other people doing the same. No one makes eye contact. It's a silent, dignified shame parade. You hope it doesn't slosh. You hope the handle holds. You pray the gods aren't feeling mischievous this morning. And you definitely don't want to be the one who spills it down the stairwell, because that's how feuds start. Long, generational feuds. Sometimes the pot isn't enough. Sometimes the need is more urgent. You consider venturing outside, but it's dark. The street is full of stray dogs, overconfident rats, and at least one man who thinks he's Bacchus reincarnated and will lecture you about wine if you make eye contact. If you do make it outside, you head to the public latrina, a shared stone bench with holes, no stalls, no doors. Just you, a row of equally desperate strangers, and the quiet, sobering thought that the Romans really didn't believe in personal space. A sponge on a stick sits in salt water nearby, ready to be shared by all. You opt for the chamber pot next time. Back in your apartment, you try to get comfortable again. The pot gurgles slightly as it settles. You pretend not to hear it. You pull your blanket back over your knees and try to think of anything other than whether the goat is inching toward it for a midnight sip. She is. No one talks about the pot during the day. It returns to its hiding place, lurking quietly, judging silently, until the next night when it reclaims its throne as the most important item in the household. It's humbling, really. You can conquer empires, build aqueducts, and host dinner parties with flamingo tongues, but at 2 a.m., every Roman, rich, poor, or somewhere in between, ends up doing the same squat and pray ritual. hoping not to miss and trying not to wake the baby. So yes, your chamber pot smells. Yes, it's undignified, but it's also survival. And in ancient Rome, that counts for everything. Rome doesn't sleep. And neither do the thieves. If you live near the Forum, odds are someone's getting mugged or loudly reciting poetry at 3 a.m. The city watch mostly pretends not to notice. The streets after dark belong to a different breed of Roman. The opportunist, the insomniac, the slightly tipsy philosopher, and the guy who lost a bet and now owes his cousin 2 chickens and a third of a tunic. You, nestled in your squeaky straw mattress, can hear it all. A distant shout, a crashing amphora, and the unmistakable sound of someone running in sandals, which, if you've never heard it, is like an annoyed duck sprinting through gravel. Let's be clear, nighttime Rome isn't just lively. It's chaos wrapped in shadows, lit by flickering oil lamps, and dusted with equal parts fear and fermented grape juice. If you live in a nice insula, you might have a wooden bolt on your door. If you're in a really nice one, you have a dog that occasionally barks at the wall and considers that a job well done. Break-ins are common. Not the elegant cat burglar kind, but the desperate, clumsy kind, someone lifting a roof tile and falling through your ceiling like a drunk celestial being. Your upstairs neighbor has a hole in his floor for exactly this reason. He now sleeps with a broom by his bed and a healthy distrust of gravity. And then there's the Vigiles Rome's firefighters and unofficial night watch. Their job is to keep the peace, put out fires, and make it look like crime isn't happening. In reality, they mostly loiter at corners, roast chestnuts, and try not to make eye contact with anyone carrying a sack that suspiciously jingles. If you catch a thief, you can shout "Fur!" at the top of your lungs. This is the ancient Roman version of calling 911, except instead of a dispatcher, you get your half-awake neighbor throwing a shoe out the window. If enough people join in, the thief might be chased off. If not, he might just pretend to be your cousin and walk off with your lamp. Public drunkenness? Oh, it's an art form. Wine is cheap, strong, and doesn't taste any better at night, but no one seems to care. A staggering man might wander into your doorway, declare himself a senator, and then pass out on your goat. You don't argue. You just cover him with a rag and hope he leaves before breakfast. Some folks roam the streets for fun, singing badly, quoting Virgil out of order, and debating whether Julius Caesar would win in a fight against a bear. Answer: only if the bear wasn't also trained in rhetoric. These people aren't dangerous, just loud, and occasionally deeply philosophical in a way that makes you question your life choices. The Forum, oddly enough, is still a hotspot. Not for politics that's during daylight. At night, it's the haunt of lovers, pickpockets, and old men in togas holding wine cups and telling stories no one asked for. A guy named Lucius claims he saw a ghost of Cicero walking past the basilica, muttering about poor sentence structure. You believe him, mostly because he was yelling it while standing on a crate. And then there are the alleyways, dark, twisted little veins of the city where shadows move on their own, and every clatter is either a rat, a cat, or a very small man with very large intentions. You don't go down those alleys. Not unless you want to lose your sandals, your coin pouch, and possibly your will to live. For protection, some households hire private guards, ex-soldiers, big arms, small brains. They stand outside, looking menacing, and are mostly useful for scaring off bored teenagers. You considered hiring one once, but he stole your neighbor's chicken on day 2 and vanished into the night. Back in your bed, you pull the blanket tighter. The wind whistles through the cracked shutters. You hear someone cursing in Latin, impressively poetic Latin, which means they're either drunk or a failed playwright. Probably both. You think briefly about the knife hidden under the bed. It's dull, slightly rusty, and more of a morale booster than an actual weapon. But still, it helps. So does the goat, who's currently asleep on your feet like a furry alarm system. Eventually, the chaos outside dies down. Someone's cart squeaks by, probably delivering stolen olives. A distant dog barks once, then decides it's not worth it. The Vigiles shuffle past your window, yawning and arguing about whose turn it is to actually check the alley. Rome never sleeps, but it does take naps. And in the moonlight, with thieves sneaking, drunk poets weeping, and watchmen avoiding paperwork, You fall back asleep to the sounds of a city both majestic and mildly insane. Tomorrow, you'll hear about it all at the baths, who got robbed, who got famous, and who accidentally locked themselves out in their toga. But for now, you're safe. You're home. You're horizontal, and your door is almost definitely locked. Probably. Lying next to your spouse, you whisper sweet nothings. Did you hear what the baker did? Do you think the aqueduct is haunted? Why do we still live above the fishmonger? Romance, Roman style. The oil lamp flickers low. You've already tripped over the chamber pot, elbowed your cousin in the spleen, and shooed Minerva the goat off the mattress for the third time tonight. But now, finally, you're horizontal. Next to you, your spouse exhales. Not in peace, in judgment. You forgot to rinse your mouth. Again. Still, this is your moment. The kids are asleep, the fire is low, and the walls are only slightly crumbling. So you lean in, face to face, under a scratchy wool blanket, and begin the ancient and sacred Roman ritual, the nighttime complaint exchange. It starts innocently enough, maybe with something like, "The wine tonight was watered down," or, "Marcus still hasn't returned my bucket." Then it escalates. "Did you see how much Claudia spent on figs? The landlord raised the rent and lowered the ceiling. Someone replaced our bread with a rock again." A rock, Gaius. There's a rhythm to it, a cadence. You both nod, sigh, tesk, and occasionally whisper shout so the goat doesn't wake the children. It's not just venting, it's bonding. Because in ancient Rome, love isn't candlelight and poetry. It's rolling your eyes in unison about the state of the drains. And oh, the state of the drains. You bring it up at least once a week. Do you smell that? It's the cloaca maxima again. It's always the cloaca maxima. You once tried to report it. The city official patted you on the shoulder and said, "Have you tried holding your breath?" Politics is also fair game. Carefully, quietly. You never know who's listening. The walls are thin. And your neighbor once tattled on someone for implying the emperor had uneven sandals. You don't take chances. So you ask in coded language, "Did you see the latest statue of the emperor?" Translation, "Does he look extra suspicious this week?" Your spouse replies, "The nose was prominent." You both nod in heavy silence. The nose means something. You shift onto your side. The mattress squeaks. Your spouse winces. "You're poking me with your elbow." You reply, "That's not my elbow." Then you both realize it's the lump in the straw mattress again. You name it Publius. It's now a permanent third party in your marriage. Then the family drama begins. You can't not. "My brother thinks he's getting the big jug in the inheritance," you mutter. Your spouse rolls their eyes. "He can't even lift the big jug." Exactly. It escalates further. "Did you hear what the baker did?" This one's a classic. It's always the baker. Either he overcharged, underbaked, or accidentally insulted someone's great-aunt by calling her crusty. You're not sure how that even happened, but it's made the rounds. Twice. And then comes the great philosophical debate. Why do we still live above the fishmonger? It's always asked like a genuine question. It never gets a real answer. You sigh in tandem, because nothing says love like shared nasal suffering. Your spouse suggests moving to the Aventine. You remind them the last time someone moved to the Aventine, their ceiling caved in, their cousin eloped with a charioteer, and they were attacked by a runaway ostrich during market day. You're not superstitious. You're just observant. Then there's the existential musing, the gentle hum of what is life that sneaks into every late-night Roman conversation. "Do you ever think the aqueduct is haunted?" one of you asks. "By water?" the other replies. You both lie there in silence, pondering ancient hydraulics and ghost plumbers. And just when the conversation starts to wind down, when you're both half asleep and drifting into dreams of figs and warm bread, one of you says it. The cursed sentence. "Did we remember to bolt the door?" Suddenly you're both wide awake, trying to remember the sound of the latch. Was it one click or two? Did the wind nudge it open again? Is the goat glaring at it like there's someone out there? Or is she just hungry? You get up. You check. You stub your toe on the stool. You curse in perfect Latin. You return. Your spouse, smugly half asleep, mutters, "I told you we did." You forgive them, mostly. Back in bed, the blanket feels colder. The lump, Publius, feels lumpier. But you're cozy in the glow of shared domestic grumbling. Pillow talk, Roman style. Less, "I love you." More, the grain ration is late again. Still, in a world of collapsing ceilings, thieving neighbors, and haunted plumbing, there's comfort in the familiar. The nightly whisper battle of two people trying to make sense of it all before morning. You yawn. You curl closer. You whisper one last truth. "I swear, if Claudia buys more figs, I'm leaving Rome." Your spouse snores. That's love. In a world without Instagram, dreams are vivid. You imagine being a charioteer, a wine merchant, a goat owner with 2 goats. You drift off imagining glory. You'll wake up and step in dung. But right now, in that delicious in-between where your straw mattress starts feeling like clouds and your feet finally stop poking someone else's kneecaps, your mind wanders. And without a glowing rectangle to scroll through or a 12-part docuseries on corrupted senators to fall asleep to, your imagination goes full Technicolor. You dream big. Or at least medium big. You imagine yourself as a charioteer in the Circus Maximus, the crowd screaming your name, your tunic flapping heroically in the wind. You've never ridden a chariot in your life. You've barely ridden a mule. You once fell off a stool. But that doesn't matter here. In the dream, you're fast, graceful, and definitely not about to crash into the turning post like Publius did that one time. R.I.P. Publius's femur. Or maybe you're a famous gladiator, the kind with nicknames. Something intimidating like the Hammer of Herculaneum or mildly menacing Marcellus. You enter the arena, muscles glistening, trident in hand. Never mind, you don't actually know how to use a trident. You once stabbed yourself trying to open a wine jug. But now? Now you are a force of nature. People throw laurel wreaths. Women swoon. Even the emperor does a little golf clap. Sometimes, the dreams are less violent. You're a respected wine merchant with a shop near the Forum. People nod at you. "Ah yes," they say, "the good wine." You nod back, modestly, as if you weren't mixing half of it with river water and optimism. You wear clean clothes. Your sandals match. You have a tunic with no stains. In other words, complete fantasy. Or maybe you run a bathhouse. You don't work there. You own it. Everyone loves your steam rooms. The caldarium is the perfect temperature. People travel from all over the city just to gossip while getting mildly boiled in your tiles. You walk through the mist like a robe-wrapped emperor. Occasionally you nod, like a benevolent, well-moisturized god. And then there's the ultimate dream. Not power, not fame, but the elusive, shimmering fantasy of upward mobility. Owning 2 goats, not 1, 2, 1 for milk, 1 for cheese, or backup milk. It's a lifestyle. You picture yourself walking through the market, goats in tow, neighbors whispering, "There goes someone who has it together." Some nights, you dream of moving out of the insula altogether, maybe to a small villa in the countryside. Olive trees, peace, no ceiling leaks, a garden. You don't even like gardening, but dream you wears a straw hat and says things like, "The figs are coming in nicely this year." Your real figs died. Twice. But in this dream, you're unstoppable. You even have chairs that match. Other nights, it's travel. You picture sailing to Alexandria or walking the great roads to Gaul. Exotic spices, new architecture, slightly different bread. You'll come back with stories, souvenirs, and maybe a hat made of something that doesn't itch. Sometimes, your fantasies are petty. You imagine finally winning an argument with your neighbor Lucius, who insists the fishmonger's son invented concrete. You stand in front of a crowd, quote Vitruvius flawlessly, and receive applause while Lucius quietly reconsiders his entire life. And sometimes your dream is as simple as sleeping in. No roosters, no children yelling, no goat gently nibbling your foot because she mistook your toe for breakfast. You wake up at sunrise, not before it. You stretch like a satisfied lion. The air smells like lavender, not lentils and fear, perfection. But every dream, whether it's gladiator glory or owning multiple dish rags, has the same ending. Reality. The rooster crows. The straw mattress squeaks. Someone in the next room farts in their sleep. A child whacks you in the ribs. You groan. The goat sneezes. And somewhere, downstairs, a fishmonger is already shouting about his latest catch. You roll over. Try to cling to the fading dream. Maybe there's still time for one more fantasy. Maybe you can drift back to that peaceful villa with clean sheets and a servant who doesn't judge your snack choices. But no. Your spouse mutters something about figs. The day begins. Still, those dreams matter. They keep you sane. They carry you through the lice, the taxes, and the never-ending smell of pickled turnips. They remind you that even in the chaos of ancient Rome, there's still room for hope, for ambition, for weirdly specific goat-related goals. So tomorrow night, you'll dream again. And maybe this time, the chariot won't crash, and the goat won't pee on your pillow. Maybe. If you're elite, bedtime is different. You have clean sheets. A servant waves a palm leaf. Someone reads you bad poetry. You complain about the temperature of your foot ointment. Then you snore like an emperor. This is not your average peasant bedtime. No straw-stuffed sack. No chamber pot within tripping range. No goat snoring at your feet unless it's decorative, wearing a wreath, and named something pretentious like Virtus. If you're wealthy, sleep becomes a theatrical performance, and you are the main character. First, there's the bed. It has legs, real ones. Probably carved from ivory or cedar or some endangered tree that smells expensive. It creaks like an old senator but looks impressive. It's not filled with hay, it's stuffed with feathers. From birds that probably had better healthcare than most citizens. The sheets are linen, or imported Egyptian cotton if you're particularly insufferable. Before you lie down, there's the nightly ritual. You don't just go to bed, you are prepared for sleep. It's a whole event. Servants buzz around like polite bees. One brings a basin of warm water for your hands. Another holds scented oil lavender, maybe rose, maybe something that smells like victory and tax exemptions. You lift a finger. They dab your temples. You sigh theatrically, like you've been emotionally burdened by too much leisure today. Then comes the poetry. A nervous client or educated slave recites a few verses, usually from Virgil or Ovid. You nod, as if pondering the deeper meaning, while actually thinking about olives. The poetry is long. The delivery is dry. You almost fall asleep, but not quite. Someone snaps, and a servant brings warm wine. It helps. At your feet, another servant gently fans you with a palm frond. This person's sole purpose is to keep you cool and validated. You've never actually spoken to them, but you've sneezed from the breeze once or twice, which is basically a shared experience. You complain gently about the ointment being slightly off. It's not. It's the same ointment as always, but complaining is half the fun of wealth. Too thick, you mutter. Too pungent. The servant nods. You suspect they mentally plot your downfall nightly, but outwardly they apply more ointment to your heel. Your bedroom has a mosaic floor. Your walls are painted in colors the poor can't pronounce. There's a fresco above your bed featuring nymphs, doing things that would get banned from modern social media. You've seen it 1,000 times, but tonight you stare at it anyway and mutter, art. Outside, Rome hums with chaos thieves, drunks, maybe a goat riot, but you don't hear it. Your windows are shuttered, your door is guarded. There's a small dog that bites strangers and occasionally your favorite sandal, but it's worth it. Some elite Romans sleep alone. Others sleep with a spouse, a concubine, a poet, or someone whose job title is just companion with strong calves. The arrangements vary. The only constant is that everyone sleeps facing the same direction, toward their own ego. You lie back, dramatically. You exhale like a dying philosopher. The bed welcomes you like a velvet cloud of superiority. Someone dims the lamp with a puff of breath and a prayer to Mercury. Now, the dreams come. Your fantasies are different. You don't dream of being a gladiator. You dream of passing laws, of winning debates, of throwing a better dinner party than that social climbing fraud Publius, who didn't even have marble plates. Sometimes you dream of conquest. Not military conquest, that's for the historians. You dream of social conquest. being quoted in the Senate, being praised in an epic, having a statue where your nose is perfectly chiseled and your enemies look slightly less attractive than in real life. You sleep with a silk cloth over your eyes because the moonlight bothers your humors. You told your physician this once, and now you get a new silk cloth every week. You suspect he's charging you for both the cloth and the moonlight. Some nights you wake up annoyed. The wine was too sweet, the poetry too heavy. You summon a servant just to sigh in their direction and ask, "Is it always this humid?" They nod solemnly. You fall asleep again mid-complaint. Snoring? Of course. Like a lion fed on self-importance and grilled peacock. You snore with power, with entitlement, with the deep nasal resonance of a man who once argued about socks for an hour and won. Meanwhile, outside, the city creaks and groans. A cart rattles. A stray dog barks. A thief trips on a loose tile. But inside your villa, all is calm. The walls are thick. The mattress is deep. The world can wait. You'll wake to fresh bread, to olives in a dish carved from imported nonsense, to debates about fountains and the color of your neighbor's shutters. You'll sigh at the burden of luxury, and you'll do it all again. Because in ancient Rome, if you're rich, even bedtime is performance art. And you? You are the lead actor, the audience, and the critic. Bravo. Fires were constant threats. You sleep lightly, nose always twitching for smoke. One rogue spark and the whole insula goes up like a pine-scented tinderbox. Sweet dreams. Your apartment, if you can call it that, is made of timber, brick dust, and centuries of architectural optimism. The floor creaks, the walls lean, the roof sighs every time the wind picks up. And somewhere in the corner is a lamp, still faintly glowing, still daring you to trust it not to murder you in your sleep. You've seen it happen. Not to you, thankfully, but to someone down the block. A toppled brazier, a forgotten cooking fire, a poorly secured oil lamp, and a curtain that had had enough. The fire spread faster than a rumor about the emperor's sandals. Within minutes, 5 homes were gone, 2 goats were singed, and someone claimed it was started by a jealous ghost. It wasn't. It was a pie, a very aggressive pie. Now, every night, as you lie down in your glorified matchbox, you prepare yourself mentally. You do your own little safety check. Lamp, wick trimmed, curtain, tied up like a suspicious cousin. Embers, smothered. Goat, not allowed near the fire after last time. She's still missing an eyebrow. And yet, you don't really sleep. You rest, one eye open, ears twitching for the telltale crackle of wood, nose on constant alert for smoke. Every creak, every pop, every shift of someone rolling over upstairs could be it. You even dream of fire, not the fun kind, like candles and celebratory torches, but the kind that eats buildings and ruins Tuesdays. Your upstairs neighbor doesn't help. He likes to smoke fish indoors. Why? Because he's a monster. Or possibly just lazy. Either way, your ceiling smells like regret, and sometimes you wake up convinced the place is already burning. It isn't. Yet. The Insulae Rome's apartment blocks were built quickly, cheaply, and with all the structural integrity of a stale biscotti. Most of them had no internal plumbing, questionable exits, and staircases so narrow you had to choose between carrying a basket of figs or your dignity. During a fire, panic, stampede, chaos. The kind of chaos that makes you wonder if this whole civilization thing might be overrated. The Vigiles Rome's Night Watch and Fire Brigade do their best. They patrol the streets in small groups, armed with buckets, axes, and a general vibe of exhausted disinterest. They'll respond if someone shouts, loudly, repeatedly, in perfect Latin. Otherwise, they're just hoping it's someone else's building. You consider moving. But where? The countryside? Full of wolves? A villa? You can't even afford matching sandals. So you stay, and you strategize. Your best plan? The grab and run. You keep a sack by the door with the essentials. 1 tunic, 1 coin, and half a wheel of cheese. Your spouse says it's not enough. You say it's realistic. The cheese stays. You've also memorized escape routes. Down the stairs, out the back, over the neighbor's balcony. Through the bakery, if you're desperate. You've practiced it. Quietly. At night. Once you landed in a cart of onions. You smelled weird for a week, but you felt safe. Some neighbors are better than others. The woman across the hall keeps a bucket of water by her door, just in case. The man next to her keeps a bucket of olives. You're not sure what his plan is, but he seems confident. The guy downstairs swears he can smell fire before it starts. He also once tried to extinguish a hot lamp with wine. It didn't go well. Your building has a ladder on the outside. Technically for repairs. Practically for escape. You've tested it. It wobbles. A lot. You pretend it's stable, you lie to yourself. It helps you sleep. Sort of. Because every night, as you lie in your bed, staring at the ceiling with one eye open, you can't help but imagine the worst. The sudden blaze. The stampede. The flaming mattress surfing down the staircase. It's not paranoia, it's historical precedent. You pull the blanket tighter. Listen to the quiet. Hope for uneventful dreams. And occasionally, you whisper to the household gods. Just let me wake up to something other than smoke. They usually listen. Usually. But still. Just in case. You never fully sleep. Not in ancient Rome. Not in a building made of kindling. You snooze. You hover. And if something crackles, you're up, dressed, and halfway down the stairs with your cheese sack in under 5 seconds. Because history doesn't reward the well-rested. It rewards the alert. While most of the city sleeps, others work. Slaves clean. Bakers prepare for morning. Street sweepers shout insults at rats. It's quiet, but not peaceful. Rome never truly sleeps. It pauses, maybe. Sputters. Wheezes. But even at its quietest, the city hums with the soft scrape of a broom, the hiss of bread dough hitting hot stone, and the occasional muffled curse as someone drops a jug in the dark. While the elite lounge in feather beds, and the average citizen clutches a scratchy blanket beneath a groaning ceiling beam, there's an entire underworld of activity, quietly keeping the city upright. Barely upright, sure, but upright nonetheless. First, the slaves. In a wealthy Roman household, bedtime isn't just a wind-down routine. It's a production, and someone has to reset the stage for the next act. That someone is usually a slave. After the last crumb of dinner is gone and the final guest has stumbled out misquoting Virgil, the real work begins. Plates scraped, floors swept, wine stains interrogated. If you're a domestic slave, you don't get peace. You get whisper commands from your half-sleeping master. Bring me my night sandals. Is the moon too loud tonight? Fluff the pillow more aggressively. You nod. You obey. You plot a quiet rebellion involving replacing foot ointment with goat lard. You don't act on it. Yet, in the bakeries it's already morning. Or at least, the pre-morning zone where sleep no longer exists and flour hangs in the air like a ghost. Bakers and their slaves start long before dawn. Firewood is stacked. Ovens are stoked. Dough is kneaded like it owes someone money. You, if you're one of them, wear a tunic dusted in flour and regret. Your arms ache from shaping loaves. Your eyes burn from smoke. You haven't blinked since midnight. And you know that some rich guy is going to complain his bread is too crusty around the 7th hour and then eat it anyway. But there's pride, too. You know your bread will be on hundreds of tables by noon. In soup. Under cheese. Probably dropped in a gutter and fought over by stray cats. Still, it matters. Then come the street sweepers. These are the true unsung heroes of Rome, part janitor, part pest control, part performance artist. Armed with brooms that look like ancient scarecrows and the world's worst attitude, they march down alleys and roads in pairs, muttering about everything. The cobblestones, the moonlight, their ex-wife's cousin, you name it. If it exists, a street sweeper has yelled at it. Their main enemy? Rats. Rome is absolutely crawling with them. Bold ones. Judgmental ones. They stare at you like you're the intruder. The sweepers shout, stomp, sometimes throw pebbles. The rats blink slowly and continue whatever deeply criminal thing they were doing. It's a war of attrition. And Rome is losing. You might pass by them if you're sneaking home late. One calls out, "Nice sandals, aristocrat," sarcastically. You don't reply. they mutter. Didn't even deny it. You're not sure what that means. Water carriers make their rounds too, hauling heavy clay jugs from wells and aqueduct spouts. Their shoulders are permanently indented. Their backs make noises you didn't think backs could make. But without them, morning would arrive dry, cranky and unbathed. So they work. Silently, swiftly, occasionally swearing when a mule cart blocks their path. Again, and don't forget the night soil men. Their job? Remove the waste. From chamber pots, from latrines, from places that shouldn't have waste, but somehow do. They carry it out in sloshing buckets, navigating stairs that lean suspiciously, and doors that don't fully open. No one makes eye contact with them. Not even other night workers. They're the reason you're not wading through filth by sunrise. Heroes. Tragic, nose-pinching heroes. While all this unfolds, the rest of the city dreams of glory, goats, and gladiators. The torches flicker. The vigiles yawn. Somewhere, a poet is still awake, whispering verses into the dark, hoping anyone is listening. But down in the underbelly, where labor replaces luxury, the city is still moving, still breathing, still cleaning up yesterday, in time for today to begin. And for those who toil in the shadows, the reward isn't fame or praise. It's survival. It's a copper coin, a scrap of bread, maybe a nap when the sun comes up. Sometimes, it's just knowing that someone, somewhere, walked safely down a swept road or bought bread that didn't taste like ash. So when you finally drift off in your creaky bed, comforted by the illusion of silence, remember this. Rome sleeps because someone else doesn't. And if you're one of those people, you're not just keeping the city alive. You're keeping it tolerable. Bad dreams? Clearly the gods are mad. You toss salt over your shoulder. Whisper a prayer to Mercury. Or blame your neighbor. Blaming your neighbor is very Roman. Because in ancient Rome, the moment your subconscious starts throwing out weird images of angry owls, collapsing aqueducts, or your deceased uncle turning into a pigeon, you don't just wake up and say, well, that was odd. No, you wake up sweating, terrified, and instantly trying to figure out what you did to offend literally every deity in the pantheon. Was it because you skipped your offering to the household gods? Or because you joked that Jupiter's latest statue looked constipated? Or maybe it was that second piece of goat cheese before bed, known to trigger not just indigestion but vivid dreams of being chased by talking columns. The Romans were a deeply superstitious bunch, especially after sundown. At night, the world went sideways. It was the domain of ghosts, curses, shady gods, and people named Gaius who were definitely up to no good. So if your dreams got weird, it wasn't just your brain doing brain things, it was an omen, a warning. Or at the very least a spiritual Yelp review. There were books, actual Roman dream manuals where dreams were interpreted like riddles written by sleep-deprived philosophers. Dreaming of losing your sandals? It could mean financial ruin. Dreaming of fire? Depends. Was it controlled fire? That's success. Wildfire? That's your cousin getting arrested. Dreaming of a fish speaking Latin? Seek help. Or invest in amphorae. Hard to say. If your dream was especially bad, like the emperor's head appeared on a donkey, bad you might wake up and immediately grab a stick of incense, toss some flour in the hearth, and chant a quick prayer to whichever god you thought might be in charge of dreams. Jupiter, Somnus, Mercury. At a certain point, you're just naming names and hoping someone up there is paying attention. And then there were the household gods, the Lares and Penates, little statues that watched over your home. You'd light a small lamp in their honor, leave a crumb or two, and ask them to ward off evil spirits. But if you skipped a night, if you forgot that one offering because your back hurt and the goat stole your matches, well, congratulations. You just invited nightmares. And possibly ants. Superstitions ran deep. Dream of a crow? Trouble. Dream of a chicken? Less trouble. Dream of a crow eating a chicken? Absolute disaster. You'd probably spend the next day avoiding eye contact with your spouse, your boss, and any bird-shaped shadows on the wall. And if you didn't want to blame the gods, risky, or yourself, unlikely, you blamed the neighbors. It's a well-documented Roman tradition. If something weird happens, your neighbor did it. Nightmares? He probably looked at you funny during dinner. Illness? She definitely whispered a curse when you borrowed her broom and didn't return it. Did your dreams involve wild animals in togas? That guy 3 doors down who brews his own wine is definitely dabbling in dark magic. This is why Romans often sprinkled salt in doorways, tied herbs above the bed, or kept little carved phalluses on the wall, not for decoration. Although why not? But as protection. Protection from curses, evil eyes, nightmares, and probably taxes. Children were especially prone to night terrors, and Roman parents responded the way any good parent would, with elaborate rituals, muttered prayers, and giving the kid a small charm shaped like a fist. It's called a fascinum. It looks obscene. That was the point. There were also magical sleep spells, scrolls, charms, or whispered phrases designed to banish bad dreams. One popular method? Write the name of the offending spirit on a tablet and bury it in the garden. Another? Get drunk and hope for the best. That one was less effective, but considerably more popular. Dreams weren't just nighttime weirdness. They were diagnostic tools. If a Roman general had a strange dream before battle, he'd call in a priest. If a senator dreamed of a wolf dancing, he'd postpone his speech. If you dreamed of your landlord turning into a goose, you'd take a different route to the forum and quietly reconsider your rent contract. And of course, if the dreams got really bad, if you kept having them night after night, each more confusing and goose-heavy than the last, there was always one last resort. You went to the augur, an official Roman dream interpreter/bird watcher. You'd pay him, explain your dream in detail, and he'd consult birds. Yes, birds. He'd watch how they flew, where they pooped, what direction they stared in. Then he'd look you in the eye and say something like, "You will have fortune, but not before you eat a pear, and avoid all bridges." And you? You'd nod, grateful, relieved. You'd go home, eat that pear, avoid bridges, and sleep with a wreath of garlic on your forehead, just in case. Because in ancient Rome, dreams weren't just dreams. They were warnings. They were signs. And occasionally they were just the result of eating questionable beans before bed. The Roman Forum at night is dead quiet. The columns cast long shadows. You walk through it with goosebumps, half expecting a senator's ghost to ask about his lost sandals. It's hard to believe this place was once the loudest, most chaotic square in the known world. By daylight, the Forum is packed, merchants shouting, orators preaching, pickpockets working overtime, and at least one guy trying to sell you genuine Etruscan relics that smell like vinegar and glue. But after dark, stillness. The kind of stillness that makes you look over your shoulder and start re-evaluating every decision that led you here, especially that late-night wine. You shouldn't be here. No one really should. Not at night. But maybe you're walking home late. Or maybe you took a wrong turn past the Temple of Castor and Pollux, and now the moonlight is the only guide, filtering between ruins like it's auditioning for a role in a tragic play. Your sandals slap softly against the stones. Each footstep echoes, bouncing off marble and memory. You walk past old Senate buildings, silent and sagging under the weight of centuries of questionable decisions. Statues loom out of the dark like judges, their faces worn smooth by time, pigeons, and existential dread. You pass the rostra, the speaker's platform. By day, it's where speeches are shouted, reputations are built, and reputations are absolutely obliterated. But by night, it's just an empty stage. You imagine Cicero still hanging around, arms crossed, ghostly eyes rolling at the current state of politics, probably muttering something sarcastic about tax reform. There's a cold breeze, the kind that doesn't just chill your skin but wiggles its fingers directly into your spine. You pull your tunic tighter. It doesn't help. You start to wonder if it's the wind, or if one of the old senators just sighed dramatically near your ear. In the distance, you hear a sound. Not voices, not footsteps. More like a rustle, a whisper of fabric. Could be wind, could be rats, could be a retired augur floating around muttering about bird patterns. You pick up the pace anyway. By night, the Forum becomes less marketplace, more mausoleum, and you're not alone in feeling it. Romans believed spirits lingered, ghosts of the dishonored, of the betrayed, of the overly dramatic. You glance up at the Temple of Saturn. its columns stretching into the sky like fingers trying to scratch eternity. You remember the old stories. Saturn, the god who ate his children. You decide not to linger under his watchful gaze, just in case he's hungry again. And the silence? It's not true silence. It's layered. Under the quiet hums the faint murmur of 1,000 past arguments, scandals, market haggles, and confused tourists asking where the latrines are. You can almost hear them if you stand still long enough, which, to be clear, you won't. Standing still feels like an invitation to something weird. You pass a statue of a forgotten general, one sandal chipped, nose long gone, he looks exhausted. You nod politely just in case. You don't want to end up in his next haunting monologue. There's a flicker of movement near the Temple of Vesta. Maybe a shadow. Maybe a bat. Maybe the Vestal Virgin's long-dead choir warming up. You decide it's a bat. Bats are fine. Bats don't whisper cryptic warnings about imperial downfall. Further along, you spot a stray cat slinking through the pillars. For a second, you're relieved until you remember that in Roman folklore, cats can be omens. Good or bad. Depends on who you ask. This one is staring at you like it knows your secrets. You keep walking. And now, finally, the archways. The great triumphal arches that celebrated Rome's greatest victories. By day, they're stunning, tall, detailed, full of heroic imagery. By night, they look like open mouths, waiting. You don't walk under them. Not tonight. Instead, you take the long way around the Basilica Julia, whisper a small prayer to Mercury, because let's be honest, you don't know who else would be on night duty, and try not to make eye contact with the statues of grim-faced gods lining your path. Their expressions don't change, but you feel the judgment. As you near the edge of the forum, the sounds of Rome return: a dog barking, a door slamming, someone yelling about bread. Real life. Human life. The warmth of it hits you like a hug from someone with body odor and debt. You don't look back, not because you're afraid, but because you're pretty sure one of the statues just winked at you. You make a mental note. No more late-night strolls through the heart of Roman politics, even if it does shave 10 minutes off your commute. Sometimes, a longer route is worth it, especially when the alternative is walking past 6 haunted columns and a ghost senator still mad about land reform. But as your feet return to familiar cobblestones, as the forum fades behind you and your pulse slowly settles, you realize something. The forum never sleeps. It waits. You lie awake thinking, will tomorrow be better? Will I ever own a 3rd tunic? Will the fish sauce price ever go down? Your eyelids droop. The night is winning. But not before your brain puts on its nightly one-man philosophical circus. It always starts with something simple, like wondering whether you remembered to latch the door. But then your thoughts spiral. What if you didn't? What if a thief slips in and steals your last good sandal? What if it rains inside again? What if your neighbor finally follows through on that threat to report your laundry bucket to the magistrate? And from there, it gets metaphysical. You stare up at the cracked ceiling, listening to a rat having a deeply personal crisis in the rafters, and ponder your place in the universe. You are but one person in a city of over 1 million. 1 million, most of whom don't even know your name. You once got called that guy with the sneeze by a passing vendor. That's your legacy, apparently. You wonder if life is meant to be more than waking up sore, dodging goat droppings, and getting into passive-aggressive eye battles with the guy at the bathhouse who definitely cuts the line. You sigh and turn over. Bad move. Now you've activated your mid-back pain. Your mattress of straw and old regrets crackles like you're lying on a salad. You try again, eyes closed, breathing slow, counting sheep. You lose count around 6 because your imaginary sheep start fighting. One is definitely your landlord in disguise. The mind drifts. Tomorrow is market day, which means you'll wake up early, elbow your way through a crowd of people trying to sell you the same 3 types of lentils, and then haggle over cabbage with a woman who once threw a rock at your cousin. She's got the best produce, though. It's complicated. You wonder if you'll ever afford a villa. Not a fancy one. Just something with 2 rooms and a view of something that isn't a wall or your neighbor's laundry flapping judgmentally in the breeze. Maybe some land. Maybe a small olive tree. 1 goat. You're not greedy. Maybe you'll start your own business. Open a tiny wine shop. or become a poet, or a bathhouse philosopher. You could sit by the caldarium and mumble vaguely profound things until someone gives you figs. Life is like a tunic wrinkled, and occasionally full of fleas. Figs incoming, your stomach growls. You remember you skipped the fish stew because it smelled like betrayal and clams. Now you're hungry and full of questions, like, why does fish sauce cost more than sandals? And why do sandals never come in your size? You turn again. The wall groans in response. Probably a ghost. You offer it a friendly nod. Same worries? You whisper. The ghost doesn't answer. Probably also thinking about tunic prices. From the next room, someone coughs. Someone always coughs. It's the unofficial anthem of Roman nighttime. Faint wind, a dripping pipe, and a persistent, phlegmy cough that you've grown oddly fond of. You're 40% sure it's coming from the upstairs neighbor's parrot. You've never seen the parrot, but you feel its presence. Outside, a dog barks. A cart rattles by. Someone yells about beans. The city's always awake, just enough to remind you that sleep is a suggestion, not a right. You close your eyes again. This time, it works for a while. You start to drift. Thoughts dissolve into fog. You dream that you're swimming in olive oil, that the emperor knights you with a loaf of bread, that you finally win an argument with your father-in-law, and the entire forum bursts into applause. But just as the dream really picks up, you're flying, on a pigeon, headed straight for a dinner party where you're the guest of honor. You jolt awake. Why? Because you remembered that you left your good tunic hanging outside. If it rains, it'll smell like mildew until Saturnalia. You sigh. Again. Sit up. Again. Briefly consider just never sleeping again. It seems easier. You lie back down, eyes burning, blanket twisted into some kind of angry toga. One last thought hits you before sleep finally wins. Maybe tomorrow the fish sauce will be cheaper. It won't be. But hope springs eternal. Even in Rome. Especially in Rome. Because no matter how many stairs you climb, how many taxes you pay, or how many questionable dinners you survive, there's always that little sliver of night where you believe things might get better, and with that, your breathing slows. The night grows quiet. And your final thought, just before you finally drift off? Please, no dreams about pigeons this time. Despite the creaking ceiling, the shouting neighbors, and the constant aroma of fermented cabbage, you finally sleep. And it's deep. Because exhaustion is Rome's greatest sleep aid. You don't so much fall asleep as you collapse into unconsciousness. It's not graceful. There's no gentle drift, no soothing lullaby, no feathered comfort. Just your body giving up and saying, "We're doing this. Now." The world around you continues its nightly performance. Somewhere above, a neighbor drags a heavy object across the floor for no clear reason. Possibly a chair, possibly a body. Either way, it's none of your business. 2 floors down, someone is having an argument with a mule. The mule is winning. On the street outside, a drunk man recites something he claims is poetry, but is actually just the word garum, repeated to a confused beat. None of it matters. You're out cold. Because today was long and loud and a little greasy. Your sleep doesn't ignore the chaos. It embraces it. It absorbs the shouting and the smells and turns them into dreams. You dream that the ceiling finally caves in, but instead of timber, it's a shower of soft figs. You dream the shouting neighbors are a choir. They harmonize surprisingly well. The cabbage? Now it's incense in a temple where a goat hands out wisdom. This is what Roman sleep looks like. Not quiet, not clean, but absolute. Your mouth hangs open. Your arm flops over the side of the bed like it gave up trying to participate. Your leg is tangled in the sheet, one toe poking out as if it's trying to escape. You snore. Not romantically, not softly. It's the kind of snore that sounds like a blacksmith forging a hangover, and no one minds. Because they're all doing it too. The entire insula is snoring in layers. There's the low rumble of the butcher's family, the sharp wheeze of the widow next door, the periodic honking noise from the guy who claims he fought in Gaul, but probably just slipped on some lentils once. Together, it's an orchestra of fatigue. Outside, Rome simmers. The watchmen mutter, the torches flicker. Somewhere in the distance, a dog finally stops barking and starts dreaming of meat. The moon creeps higher, shining down on rooftops, on temples, on the slouched form of a statue that has seen too much. And inside your tiny room, your body begins to repair itself. Your feet, which walked 12,000 steps over uneven stones, swell gently like rising bread dough. Your back, which has carried firewood, water, and emotional baggage, flattens against the straw like it's negotiating a truce. You dream again. This time, you're sailing down the Tiber in a boat made of cheese. Everyone on board applauds as you invent a better version of sandals. You're rich, you're powerful, you're well rested. You wake up briefly, halfway through the dream, because a mouse sneezed in the corner, but you're too tired to care. You grunt, shift positions, and immediately fall back asleep with your face half buried in what might be a tunic or possibly your laundry from 3 days ago. Sleep returns like a heavy blanket of fog. You're no longer fully aware of the room, the time, or the very real chance that your neighbor is sleepwalking again. All that exists is the dim glow of your eyelids and the slow rhythm of your breath. At one point, a rooster crows prematurely. Everyone hates that rooster, but no one gets up. Not yet, you still have hours left. Hours of badly lit dreams, cramped legs, and a pillow that feels like it's made of damp bread, but it's your bread. Your damp, floppy, comforting bread. Because for all its noise and nonsense, Rome teaches you how to sleep in spite of it, or maybe because of it. The chaos becomes the lullaby, the distant gossip, the creaking wood, the laughter from the alley. They blend into the perfect cocktail of ambient sound. Add in a day of relentless walking, poor nutrition, mild dehydration, and the emotional toll of haggling over turnips, and you have a recipe for instant unconsciousness. And when you do finally wake up groggy, stiff, unsure of what year it is, you'll be greeted by the usual suspects. Morning bread smells, the neighbor's child running full speed into a wall, and the joyful reminder that your back still doesn't work quite right. But for now, you are at peace. Cradled in straw, wrapped in a scratchy blanket, face smooshed into a pillow that smells faintly of you and garlic, and despite everything, despite Rome itself, you are asleep. Deep, complete, triumphant. Technically this is tomorrow, but you're already annoyed. The rooster crows, you groan, your back hurts. The day begins again. Welcome to the eternal city. The rooster, by the way, has no sense of timing. It doesn't care that you finally fell asleep 20 minutes ago. It doesn't care that your dream of owning a 3-room villa and inventing the first reliable plumbing system was just getting good. No. It squawks with the force of 10 very angry senators and ruins everything. You crack one eye open. It's still dark. Of course it is. This rooster has a personal vendetta against your happiness. You're convinced of this. It must have made a deal with the gods. In exchange for immortality, I shall make this man tired forever. You roll over. Your back makes a sound like a collapsing bookshelf. Your shoulder doesn't work. Your foot is asleep, possibly forever. You lie there and contemplate the life choices that led to sleeping on a sack of straw inside a wooden box built on top of another wooden box held together by ambition and dust. Your spouse is still asleep, jealous. They've achieved that rare Roman miracle, uninterrupted sleep. You briefly consider waking them in revenge, but decide instead to stew silently. Very mature. Then comes the second rooster. Oh yes, there's a second one. A backup rooster, just in case the first didn't shatter your soul enough. This one lives farther away, but its voice is higher, shriller, like a gladiator with a flute shoved up his nose. It crows in response, because now it's a duet. Welcome to the opera of your discontent. You sit up. Regret floods in immediately. Your knees do not support this decision. They issue a formal protest. Your spine joins in, accompanied by your neck, which has been in the shape of a question mark since sometime after midnight. You stumble toward the door, nearly tripping over a sandal, a jug, and what might be last night's dream still clinging to your ankle. You open the shutter. Rome yawns before you. It's not awake, exactly. It's in that hazy pre-dawn state where everything looks like it's been painted in old wine. The sky is purple, the street is grey. The neighbour's laundry has mysteriously multiplied overnight. No one's moving yet, but you can hear it. The soft rustle of bread makers, the creak of cart wheels, the low, existential sigh of a man who just remembered he forgot to soak the lentils. You grab some water to splash on your face. It's cold. It smells like old pipes and bronze coins. You don't care. You're trying to simulate being alive. Breakfast is a dream, a myth. You might chew on a leftover crust if the mice didn't beat you to it. Otherwise, you'll hold out until mid-morning and pretend your stomach isn't loudly accusing you of treason. The city begins to stir. Footsteps on stairs. Distant yelling. Someone is already arguing with the fishmonger, who hasn't even opened his stall yet. It's too early for this. It's always too early for this. You stretch. One arm works. The other feels like it's been attacked by a furniture curse. You try to remember your plans for the day. There was something important. Was it market day? Did you promise to help fix the roof? Is today the day you finally confront the man who keeps accidentally taking your washing line space? Unclear. Your brain hasn't booted yet. It's still updating its scrolls. The third rooster joins in now. Because why stop at 2? It's not even your rooster. You don't have a rooster. Your life has been ruined by poultry that isn't even yours. A metaphor for Roman society if ever there was one. You glance at the street. The baker's boy is already delivering the day's loaves. You hate how cheerful he looks. How bouncy. You're convinced he has access to better straw. You sip from a cup of water and think, maybe today will be different. It won't be. But you let yourself believe, just for a moment, that something magical might happen, that your neighbor won't block the stairwell with amphorae, that the bathhouse will have hot water and gossip, that the bread will be warm, that the price of fish sauce will finally, mercifully drop. You sigh, and then you move, because there is no pause button in Rome, no snooze. The city marches forward, cobblestones and curses alike. And you? You're part of it. Your joints complain, your face twitches, your tunic is wrinkled beyond salvation, but you step out anyway, into the noise, into the smell, into the rooster-stained morning of a city that hasn't changed in centuries. The day begins again. Welcome back. And so, as the last flickering oil lamp dims, and the final echoes of the street vendors fade into the cobbled silence, your Roman evening comes to an end. You've survived fish sauce breath, noisy neighbors, scratchy tunics, and a bed that sounded like it came with its own snackable rodent population. You made it through dinner barely. You didn't burn down your insula. You didn't trip over the chamber pot in the dark, and you managed to drift off to sleep, despite the sound of someone arguing about olive prices in the alley below. In other words, a successful night in ancient Rome. Tonight, we honor the resilience of ordinary Romans people who endured cracked walls, questionable hygiene, and bedbugs with dreams of citizenship. They lived in a city without central heating, deodorant, or reliable plumbing, and still found time to argue passionately about poetry and politics while covered in soot and goat hair. Because that's the thing about history, it's not just emperors and marble statues. It's the tired bricklayer who comes home after sunset, the mother trying to get her children to sleep in a one-room apartment, and the guy muttering about taxes as he climbs 5 flights of ancient stairs. So tonight, as you lie in a clean bed, wrapped in soft sheets, with no risk of your ceiling collapsing mid-dream, take a moment to whisper a quiet thank you to the Romans who walked before you, who built aqueducts by day and complained about their neighbors by night, who bathed in lukewarm public tubs and somehow made it work. History may be gritty, smelly, and deeply inconvenient, but it's also stubborn, ingenious, and oddly familiar. Sleep well, knowing that even 2,000 years ago people were just trying to get through the evening in one piece and hopefully with both sandals still intact. Good night, time traveler. You've earned your rest.